Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Fidel Lopez. This is the content of a chaotic call in the middle of the night. What's wrong with you? Hello, listen, you gotta help me. My girlfriend is in the bathroom, she can't get enough air. I mean, oh my God, she's gonna die. Come on, I can barely understand you. Calm down. Oh my God, I know what happened. There's blood on the floor, I don't know, she's not breathing. I mean, she's gonna die. Come on, what's the address? I don't know, I was just smoking my cigarette. Man, I'm just smoking my cigarette, and then this happened. Damn it, Maria. Come on, please, I need you to tell me an address so we can assist you. Sir, I need an address so we can help you. In the early hours of Sunday morning, Fidel Lopez, 24, lit a cigarette inside his new apartment. Just behind the broken sliding glass door lay his 31-year-old girlfriend, Maria Lizette Namath, in a pool of her own blood, either dead or dying. He finished his cigarette and gathered the courage to call 911. The operator, understanding the situation and the address, quickly dispatched officers. The call was recorded at 3:39 a.m. on Sunday, September 20th, 2015. The specialists witnessed a horror show. According to detective investigator Christopher Piper, when the officers entered Lopez's apartment, they found Lopez standing next to Maria's body. He called for help, and the doctors immediately rushed to Maria lying in the pool of blood. The police noted that the dressing room was also splattered with blood. They observed extensive damage to the walls and doors throughout the apartment. Maria showed no signs of life and was pronounced dead at 4:02 a.m. Clear signs of a struggle and a near certainty that violent acts had taken place led to the apartment being declared a crime scene, which was placed under guard. Lopez was also detained pending the arrival of investigators. Piper reported that when he arrived at the crime scene, he briefly spoke with one of the officers and conducted a preliminary search of the nearly empty apartment. A Sunrise police officer informed the detective about Maria and Fidel. They had moved into the apartment less than a week ago. Maria, a native of Peru, was a rental manager for an apartment complex, while Fidel worked as a mechanic at a truck stop. They had begun dating about a year and 2 months prior after meeting at a club. Maria had recently separated from her husband after 8 years of marriage, and Fidel lived with his mother. They decided to live together and moved into an apartment in Terrace, Sunrise. It was clear from the apartment that Maria and Fidel had just moved in, were starting their life together almost from scratch. There was no full set of furniture, boxes were used as tables. On the night of the incident, the apartment was bare, making the dents and holes in the walls immediately noticeable. A broken glass door, blood virtually everywhere. In Detective Piper's report, it states that Maria's naked body was lying on the bathroom floor. In addition to the blood on the floor, there were bloody marks on the walls in the hallway, on the closet and bathroom doors, as well as many other surfaces. Inside the closet were pieces that looked like bloody human flesh. Initially, it was assumed that Maria had tried to terminate a pregnancy, but as forensic experts later discovered, it was the intestines that Fidel had torn out of his girlfriend during rough intimate. Detective Piper introduced Lopez to the police officers, who took him to the Sunrise police station at 7:40 a.m., where he was informed of his Miranda rights and placed in an interrogation room. Fidel then signed a waiver of these rights, claiming that although he didn't understand English, if it were read aloud to him, he would comprehend it. Defense attorneys later would unsuccessfully argue that since Fidel was not a native English speaker, he could not fully understand the Miranda rules. Miranda rights are a legal requirement in the United States, mandating that detainees be informed of their rights. The law enforcement officer who detains them must receive a positive response to the question of whether the detainee understands what has been said. Fidel Lopez, a native of Havana, Cuba, moved to the United States at the age of 16, attended high school, but dropped out in the 10th grade. Fidel recounted to the investigator his relationship with Maria, how it began, and how it developed up to that Saturday. On that day, he left work a couple of hours early and met Maria, who had also left home early. Maria cooked dinner for them, consisting of chicken, beans, and rice. After dinner, They visited Fidel's mother in Miami, then returned to their apartment, where they each had a glass of margarita, splitting a third drink. Later, they went to a liquor store and purchased a bottle of tequila. By about 10 p.m., they were home. According to Fidel, Maria was already tipsy from the margarita. At home, they continued to drink, placing 2 cardboard boxes on the floor since they didn't have a table, put their glasses and snacks on the boxes while listening to music. As the tequila took effect, Maria asked Fidel to fulfill some of her intimate fantasies. Much of what Fidel claimed was cruel and dangerous, but since he was her partner, he tried to comply with her requests. However, his memories from that night were fuzzy. He was drunk. As they engaged in various activities, Maria mentioned that she was feeling sick and asked him to leave the bathroom. Fidel stepped outside and found himself outside, smoking a cigarette. He doesn't remember if he broke down the bathroom door or if it was already broken, but it is most likely that he did it since Maria wasn't strong enough. He only remembers seeing broken glass on the floor and does not recall more details about how he broke it and why. He also remembers that he went to the bathroom and that Maria was somehow breathing intermittently at that time. Fidel thought that perhaps she was hurting herself, but he did not hear the characteristic sounds associated with that. When the detectives asked about the quarrel that occurred that night, Fidel replied that there were no quarrels, they were just drinking and listening to music. The detectives continued to probe and posed leading questions. Lopez was asked if he felt offended when his girlfriend spoke dismissively about his masculine qualities. He replied that he was not upset, just felt a little stupid. The next question from the investigators was whether there had been any damage to the apartment before they moved in. Fidel responded that everything was fine in the apartment. However, since the detectives were focused on the specifics of when and why things happened, they asked what he might have done in those moments when he was angry. During further interrogation, it appeared that Fidel might have felt angry about Maria's ex-husband, whom she had mentioned during their intimate, but he couldn't recall exactly what was said. The detectives continued the interrogation in the form of a normal conversation, maintaining a neutral tone without accusations. When discussing the moment Fidel realized that Maria had died, it was evident that he was overcome with emotion. He then began to explain that he tried to perform artificial respiration on Maria, despite not knowing how to do it properly. She was lying with her eyes open but was not moving, and he lay next to her on the floor, trying to bring her back to life while screaming for help, hoping someone would come. I tried to give her artificial respiration, but I didn't even know how to do it. She wasn't breathing at all, she had her eyes open but wasn't moving. I carried her in my arms and waited for the police. The police were interested to know whether Fidel had ever physically assaulted Maria before or used force against her, but he denied any physical violence during the interrogation. Then he was asked an important question: does that mean you admit that everything that happened in this apartment was destroyed and broken by you? He confirmed this statement, insisting that he did not hurt Maria and continually asked if she was comfortable. Even when he noticed that she was bleeding, she said that she was not in pain. The officers informed Fidel that Maria had been examined by a forensic expert, who indicated that her injuries were very serious, involving internal bleeding, damage to internal organs, and multiple ruptures. When the police suggested that a brutal abuse had occurred, Fidel began to deny everything. He insisted he had done everything Maria asked him to do. They explained to him that Maria had serious internal injuries and that the pain she was experiencing would have been unbearable. Fidel, however, maintained that he had acted with her consent. The detectives attempted to persuade him that someone who truly loves another person could never cause such harm. They stated Maria was seriously injured. They began to reproach him for failing to show her due attention. There's blood everywhere. Fidel appeared confused and was then told he needed to confess to what happened, particularly since the police had learned much more than what he had disclosed. They argued that if he loved Maria, she deserved an honest conclusion to this story. Fidel again agreed with these conclusions. Fidel loved this girl, of course. He wouldn't have done anything to hurt her, but he did. After a moment of silence, Fidel began to speak rapidly and interrupted himself. He revealed that Maria had mentioned wanting to go to Peru to visit her mother and would be gone for a while, which meant Fidel could not use her car to travel to and from work. This prompted an argument, though he could not recall how they ended up in the closet. They made up, had intimate, and at one point Maria called out the name of her ex-husband. This happened twice. Then Fidel described a series of attacks on Maria using both his body and various objects around the house, shoving them into her crotch. After his rage, Lopez returned to the closet where his girlfriend lay unconscious and continued to insert various foreign objects into her vagina and anus, including a beer bottle, a hair straightener, both fists, and his arm up to his elbow. Fidel also admitted to pulling internal tissue out of Nemeth's body while she was unconscious. He then took her naked body into the bathroom and attempted to revive her by splashing water in her face, but she did not wake up. He then washed the blood off his hands and went to the porch outside their apartment to smoke a cigarette. When Lopez returned inside to try to clean up the crime scene and conceal Nemeth's dislodged intestines, he realized she was no longer breathing. He began running around the rooms, smashing and breaking everything in sight. Afterward, he stopped to exhale, have a smoke, took off the clothes he was wearing, washed himself, put on fresh clothing without getting dirty, and called 911. Fidel confessed to the detectives that he committed the crime because, during their intimacy, at the height of pleasure, Maria shouted out another name. He expressed regret for what he did, saying he didn't want to kill her, but he knew he killed her. He took her life. He won't even be able to see her again. While the interrogation was ongoing, experts were collecting evidence at the crime scene and examining Maria's mutilated body. Police officers interviewed neighbors, many of whom noted hearing screams and sounds of conflict. Fidel Lopez was arrested and charged with murdering his girlfriend, Maria Nemeth. A long, dreadful night dragged on until midday before Fidel was shackled and transferred to the Aburrá County Jail, a man with no criminal record other than a 2014 arrest for intoxicated hooliganism. He was jailed in a cell recognized as a murderer, a monster who deserved to be caged. Perhaps it was the alcohol that drove him to madness. Perhaps jealousy turned him into someone he never imagined he could become. In the early stages of the trial, Fidel's lawyers attempted to challenge his entire interrogation and confession, arguing that his limited knowledge of English meant he could not understand his Miranda rights or request the presence of a lawyer from the moment of his arrest, as well as his right not to answer certain questions at his discretion. However, the judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence on the video recording showing that Fidel not only had a functional command of English but also fully understood what he was being asked. On July 14, 2017, after a lengthy stay in the Broward County Jail, Fidel agreed to a plea deal. On August 3, 2017, Fidel Lopez accepted charges of first-degree murder, abuse, assault, and was sentenced to life in prison. The terms of the plea deal prohibit him from appealing the sentence and ensure that he will never be eligible for parole. The peace of the families of Fidel Lopez and Maria Nemeth was shattered that fateful night. No one can undo the monstrous events that occurred. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Maria Luisa. Maria Luisa was born on May 29, 1977, in La Fortuna, San Carlos, in Alajuela, Costa Rica. She was the youngest of 5 children in a humble family. From an early age, she was ambitious and determined. She wanted to help people and dreamed of becoming a doctor, telling herself she would be the first in her family to get a college degree. During her school years, she excelled in chemistry and biology, her favorite subjects. After graduating in 1994, she was accepted into the country's most prestigious medical school, located in San Jose. As a student, Maria moved to the capital and lived there for the rest of her life. However, she still maintains a close relationship with her family, visiting and get in touch with them. In 2000, after earning her degree, Maria began working as an anesthesiologist at one of the largest medical centers in the capital. She quickly excelled in her career, continuously learning and honing her skills. By 2015, she had risen to become the head of the anesthesiology and recovery therapy department. She was highly respected and admired by her colleagues, become a famous doctor. However, to achieve success, Maria had to trade in her personal life. For many years, she was alone, fully dedicated to her work. In 2017, at the age of 40, she started dating a doctor at the same hospital, though he worked in a different department. She believed he was her true love and someone with whom she could build a happy family. Unfortunately, at the start of 2020, their relationship ended, and he started dating a younger co-worker. The breakup was a painful experience for Maria. She suffered from severe depression and focused only on work for months, barely paying attention to the world around her. Her only source of comfort was her small dog, Mafalda, she loved and cared for as if he were her child. In July 2020, Maria felt like she needed some time off and change your living environment to relax your mind. She decided to visit the coast and stay at a small, cozy hotel called La Mansion Inn, located in the picturesque Punta Arenas region. Before, this resort attracted tourists from around the world, but now this place is very deserted. At the hotel, only a few rooms were occupied, which provided the peace and quiet Maria was seeking. She planned to spend the weekend there and return home on Monday, bringing her beloved dog Mafalda along with her. Maria stayed in a room on the ground floor, has a second door leading to a private yard. These rooms are designed for guests with pets, so it can go outside and relieve themselves in a designated area. At the time, all the other rooms with courtyard access were unoccupied. On July 18, Maria arrived, left her belongings in her room, and went to the beach. The following day was equally uneventful. She walked along the shore, relaxed in the sun, had dinner at a restaurant, and returned to her room. That evening, she called her mother, and they talked for about 30 minutes. During the call, Maria remarked on how empty the hotel felt, with only a handful of staff members. She intended to check out the next morning, after breakfast, but she never did. On the morning of July 20, Maria did not come down for breakfast. The hotel staff noticed her absence, as there were very few guests, but assumed she was simply sleeping. However, when checkout time arrived, and she still hadn't appeared, they decided to check her room. 2 staff members knocked on her door but received no response. They could hear her dog barking inside, which confirmed she was there. Despite repeatedly knocking and calling her name, the only sound was the dog's barking. Concerned, they went to the courtyard to see if they could access her room from another entrance. They found the second door unlocked and decided to go inside to see what was going on. As soon as they stepped inside, they noticed brownish stains on the floor, resembling dried blood. On the bed, they discovered a body wrapped in a sheet. The staff immediately contacted emergency services and informed hotel management. Unfortunately, when paramedics arrived, they confirmed that Maria was dead. She had been killed several hours before her body was discovered. The scene was deeply unsettling, from the condition of the room to the circumstances surrounding her death. Maria's body showed multiple cuts, bruises, and bite marks inflicted by different individuals. Defensive wounds on her hands indicated she had fought back desperately. The cause of death was determined to be mechanical asphyxia and a broken neck. She had been strangled with such force that her cervical vertebrae were fractured. The autopsy confirmed that Maria had been sexually assaulted before her death. Beside her bed, there was a bottle of mineral water, an opened bottle of expensive wine, and 2 glasses. According to hotel staff, she had ordered these items the previous night, but she was alone at the time. Maria's keycard records show that after she received the items, she did not leave the room and no one entered. However, the glass door leading to the courtyard did not require a key, which could have allowed the attacker to gain access. The hotel had several security cameras that could have helped shed some light on the matter, but it turned out they had all been out of service for months. The hotel management explained that they had cut costs by shutting off the cameras. Forensic experts analyzed the bite marks on Maria's body for DNA, expecting to find the attacker's saliva. However, the results were shocking. The saliva belonged to Maria herself. Since the bite marks were located on her face, neck, and chest, areas she could not have reached herself. Investigators deduced that the attacker had deliberately placed her saliva on the wounds to conceal their own DNA. Another disturbing detail revealed by the pathologist was that Maria's body had been thoroughly cleaned after her death. This indicated that after torturing, strangling, and killing her, the attackers washed her body in the bathroom, placed her back on the bed, contaminated the bite marks with her saliva, and wrapped her body in a sheet. Because the hotel's cameras were not working and the grounds were very deserted, no witnesses could be identified. Both guests and hotel staff reported that they did not see anything unusual, and they did not see any strangers appearing on the premises. The brutal murder of Maria, a famous anesthesiologist, quickly became the focus of national attention, causing great public outrage. Police are under pressure to investigate and find the culprit who committed the brutal act against an innocent woman. When asked if Maria might have had a brief romance during the trip, her family firmly denied it. She was still heartbroken over a recent breakup and had been hoping for reconciliation. Regarding the 2 glasses found in the room, Maria's sister explained that she always used 2 glasses, one for wine and one for water. Forensic analysis confirmed this explanation, as only Maria's fingerprints and lip marks were found on the glasses. During their interview with the police, her mother suddenly remembered something from her daughter's last phone call. Maria had mentioned chatting with a man who worked at the hotel during lunch. She said he had asked her why she was traveling alone and how long she planned to stay. This detail provided detectives with their first suspect to investigate. The employee in question was 38 years old, Teodoro Herrera, the son of a close friend of the hotel owner, Harry Baudin. In fact, thanks to his father's connection with Harry, he got the job at the hotel. He worked as a bartender and also ran personal errands for Harry. During his interview with the police, he behaved oddly. He was extremely nervous. He claimed that he did not know Maria and did not remember ever speaking to her. Detectives noticed fresh scratches on Teodoro's cheeks and neck, for which he couldn't provide a clear explanation. When asked to remove his shirt, similar scratches were found on his chest and shoulders. Investigators suspected these marks were left by Maria as she fought for her life, but they needed forensic confirmation. He was arrested and held for 6 months while the investigation continued. Forensic analysis later confirmed that blood and skin particles from Teodoro were found under Maria's nails. However, the bite marks on her body did not match his dental impressions. The investigation then shifted focus to a 36-year-old man named Luis Carlos Miranda. He was not a regular guest or employee at La Mansion Inn, but he was a friend of the hotel owner, Harry, and often stayed there for free. One of the bite marks on Maria's body was potentially linked to he, though it wasn't conclusive. Still, the police arrested him as a second suspect and detained him for 6 months, just like Teodoro. He also denied ever meeting Maria or having any interaction with her. About 10 days after the murder, a third suspect was arrested, Harry Baudin, the 69-year-old hotel owner. Harry, a businessman of Dutch origin, was well connected with politicians. He owned multiple properties across different countries. His arrest was prompted by a bite mark on Maria's body that matched his dental impressions. Investigators also discovered that about 6 months before the murder, he had undergone surgery at the hospital where Maria worked. Although he claimed he had never met her, police suspected he might have noticed her during his hospital stay, obtained her contact information, and lured her to his hotel. Initially, Harry was placed under house arrest due to his age and health problems. However, when he moved to a new residence without informing the authorities, he was taken into custody over concerns he might attempt to flee the country. Another individual connected to the case was Harry's husband, Yater Daniel Abanda. However, no evidence was found to convict him. He denied any involvement, stating that Harry had been unwell that night and had not left their room. After reviewing the autopsy and forensic results, investigators determined that there were 3 attackers involved. There were no signs of ropes or restraints used to hold down Maria. but all her limbs displayed bruises consistent with being pinned by hands. Fabric fibers and a thread were discovered inside her mouth, indicating she had been gagged. This likely explains why none of the other guests or staff heard her screams, although her injuries and signs of torture showed that she must have been desperately calling for help. On Maria's phone, found in her room, there were messages to her sister in which she praised the hotel. She described it as beautiful, cozy, and quiet, complimenting the staff for being attentive. She also mentioned spending the evening chatting and dancing at the bar with the man who served coffee, identified as Teodoro. From the start, Teodoro was the main suspect. He was the only suspect of the three with visible scratches, and forensic evidence revealed his skin and blood under Maria's fingernails. Additionally, his DNA was found on her body, despite his attempts to wash it off. However, dental cast comparisons showed that his teeth did not match the bite marks on her skin. After returning to her room, Maria stayed in her room all evening and didn't allow anyone inside. Investigators suspected the attackers entered through the door leading to the courtyard. It's possible she left the door unlocked for her dog to go outside. Since the neighboring rooms were unoccupied, no one would have noticed. Once inside, the attackers acted quickly. They struck Maria on the head, rendering her unconscious, gagged her, and then subjected her to hours of torture and assault. Afterward, they strangled her with such force that her neck was broken. They then washed her body in the bathroom, placed it on the bed, and wrapped it in a sheet, dirtying the bite wound with her saliva. During the trial, all three suspects, Teodoro, Harry, and Luis, denied involvement, claiming they were asleep in their rooms that night. However, no witnesses could corroborate their alibis. Investigators found disturbing text messages on their phones in which they shared frightening thoughts. The day before the crime, they even discussed a guest who was alone. The trial is set for September 2022, more than 2 years after the murder. Harry, 71, had to appear in court in a wheelchair because of worsening knee problems that made it difficult for him to walk. The prosecution immediately had difficulty proving Harry and Luis's involvement in the crime. The evidence against them was largely circumstantial, consisting of text messages and dental impressions. The defense argued that the bite marks should be dismissed as evidence because they did not perfectly match their dental records. To support this argument, Harry's lawyer hired an orthodontist from Madrid to testify. After analyzing the bite marks on Maria's body, orthodontist concluded that they were insufficient as evidence and could not definitively establish a link between Harry, Luis, and the crime. However, after orthodontist returned to Spain the following day, the prosecution questioned his credentials. Further investigation confirmed that he did not have a valid certificate and was merely a self-proclaimed expert. As a result, his testimony was discredited and thrown out. Despite this, the prosecution was determined to prove a connection between Harry, Luis, and the case. They argued that the brutal, calculated nature of the assault and murder indicated the involvement of at least 3 people. The defense denied this claim, insisting that a healthy individual was perfectly capable of performing the act without assistance. The verdict was delivered with clear and undeniable evidence, all pointing to Teodoro Herrera as the culprit. His DNA was found in Maria's body, his skin cells appeared under her fingernails, and her blood was discovered both on the outside and inside of his shoes. The shoe prints matched those found at the entrance of her room and near the bed. Consequently, he was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole. At 40 years old, this effectively amounted to a life sentence. He admitted to being intimate with Maria that night, but claimed it was consensual and insisted someone else must have killed her after he left. In contrast, there was insufficient evidence against Harry and Luis. Apart from bite marks and text messages, nothing concrete linked them to the crime. As a result, they were acquitted and released in March 2023. However, in September of the same year, An appeals court revisited the case after a complaint from Maria's family and ordered it to be reopened. By then, Harry and Luis had already fled Costa Rica, leaving the country immediately after their release. They are currently living in the Netherlands, and even if the trial is reopened and they are found guilty, they will not face any consequences because the Netherlands and Costa Rica do not have an extradition treaty, even though this is a very serious crime. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rocio Waninkoff. Hilaria Alicia Hornos was born on December 2, 1952, in the rural province of Jaén, Spain, specifically in the city of Arroyo del Ojanco. At the age of 24, she fell in love and married Willem Waninkoff, a Dutch citizen. They had 3 children, a son, Guillermo, followed by 2 daughters, Rosa and Rocio. However, as their family grew, so did the strain on their marriage. Willem suffered from alcoholism, which led to frequent absences from home and eventually led to his losing his job. Their arguments escalated, with Willem sometimes raising his voice at Alicia and becoming aggressive. To support her family, Alicia took a job as a maid at a hotel in Ibiza. During this difficult period, she met Dolores, who was the director of the hotel where she worked. Dolores Vasquez was the daughter of immigrants from Galicia. She is highly educated and polite, and a very interesting conversationalist. A strong friendship developed between Alicia and Dolores, which later developed into a romantic relationship. A year after starting her relationship with Dolores, Alicia decided to divorce Willem. He then returned to the Netherlands, and Alicia moved in with Dolores. Soon after, the couple bought a new house in Malaga. After the divorce, Alicia gained custody of all 3 children and raised them with Dolores. All 3 of Alicia's children loved Dolores, and the 5 of them lived together as a family. In 1988, Alicia and Dolores chose to end their romantic relationship, but continued to live together as friends until 1994. After 11 years, they parted ways, and Alicia began dating a man named Juan Charillo. She moved into a new place and embraced her new romantic life. With her children grown and her new partner by her side, life felt vibrant and full of love. On the morning of October 10th, 1999, Alicia discovered that her daughter, Rocio, was missing. Initially, she wasn't alarmed, thinking Rocio might have spent the night at her boyfriend's house or a friend's place. However, as the day went on and Rocio still had not returned, Alicia grew worried. The family reached out to Rocio's friends and boyfriend, hoping to find out where she was, but no one had seen her. On the evening of October 9th, Rocio left home around 5:30 p.m. after saying goodbye to her mother and older sister, Rosa. She was headed to a fair in Fuengirola with her boyfriend, Antonio, and her friends. Rocio lived in the La Tierra neighborhood, which was very close to Antonio's house. She spent time at his place until 10:30 p.m. and planned to return home briefly to shower and change before heading to the fair. Unfortunately, she never arrived home. Although Alicia was worried about her daughter Rocio's disappearance, she chose to go for a walk with Juan, instead of contacting the police immediately. While walking down the street, Alicia noticed a large blood stain on the road. She pointed it out to Juan, who initially didn't think much of it. However, as they got closer, Alicia noticed her daughter's sneakers lying there with drops of blood on them. Alicia was very panicked, and while walking, they also discovered a napkin and some blood on a vacant lot next to the path Rocio often walked. Alicia immediately called the police, and a missing person report was filed with a detailed description of Rocio. She had long hair, brown eyes, and was last seen wearing a white Nike t-shirt and purple pants. Police quickly arrived at the scene where the blood was found, and forensic officers conducted a forensic examination of the crime scene to determine whose blood was on the road and sneakers. Initially, the investigation suggested that there had been an assault or fight that resulted in injuries. The trail showed several bloodstains, including long ones that looked like someone had moved quickly, possibly running. Eventually, the bloodstains disappeared, but the search team discovered a large trail that suggested significant blood loss. They also discovered bloody footprints. These led to tire tracks, where the bloodstains stopped. Next to the tire tracks, they found a cigarette butt from a brand that is not common in Spain. Forensic teams have collected all relevant samples to assist in the investigation, and it is hoped that DNA from these samples will help identify people who were at the scene. A detailed investigation was conducted, along with analysis of the blood found at the scene. Although the search for Rocio continues, police believe it is highly likely that Rocio was murdered. The blood trail began on the sidewalk and led to a large pool of blood, indicating significant blood loss that likely led to her death. Nearby, there were drag marks near the tire. This tire was identified from a small car, specifically a tire model that was discontinued in 1993. Since the drag marks extended over a steep area, it can be concluded that at least 2 people moved the body before a vehicle later arrived to remove the body. The search for Rocio continued, with volunteers scouring the area on foot and on motorbikes. Flyers with Rocio's picture were widely distributed, and news channels reported extensively on Rocio's disappearance. The family actively cooperated with journalists to get the word out about Rocio. Reporters from all television channels gathered outside Rocio Vaninkoff's home, hoping for her safe return. However, as time passed, the search yielded no clues. A few days after Rocio's disappearance, a local taxi driver came to the police station with vital information. He reported that on the night of Rocio's disappearance, around 10 p.m., he narrowly avoided a collision with an SUV traveling at high speed in the opposite lane near where Rocio's sneakers were found on the side of the road. As he passed the car, he also heard a loud scream. This evidence strongly suggested that Rocio had been abducted and murdered by an unknown assailant. DNA analysis later confirmed that the blood found on the road belonged to Rocio. The news left her family devastated, and the sense of loss quickly spread, affecting not only Rocio's loved ones, but the entire country of Spain. On November 2, 1999, 25 days after Rocio's disappearance, a disfigured body, believed to be Rocio's, was discovered near the Los Altos del Rodeo Athletic Club, between Marbella and San Pedro de Alcantara. The body was partially obscured by bushes and leaves, lying behind a fence separating a residential area from a nearby highway. The body was found on a narrow road that was difficult for cars to access. Rocio's body was found in another town. When police arrived, they found the body severely decomposed. During the collection of evidence, large black garbage bags containing Rocio's clothing were found. One of the bags had the number 8 painted on it, suggesting that the bags had been reused rather than purchased specifically for transporting the body. Police found clothing that they believed might belong to the missing Rocio. Her sister Rosa identified several rings, 2 t-shirts, and other items in 2 trash bags near the body as belonging to Rocio. The t-shirts had been torn from stab wounds. Rocio's body was then taken to the laboratory for forensic analysis, where experts worked carefully, applying their knowledge and skills. They faced a difficult task due to the severe decomposition of the body. Decomposition occurs much more quickly in rain and high temperatures, especially when there is humidity. The objective was to gather additional evidence to aid the investigation and understand how the attack happened. Several closed wounds were discovered, along with 8 stab wounds on the Rocio's back. Experts believe the attack was swift and violent, suggesting the Rocio was either restrained or unable to defend themselves. Fingerprints were found on plastic bags at the scene where the body was located. The police already had fingerprints and tire tracks from a vehicle, and they also collected 2 tissue samples from Rocio's body. At that stage, there was insufficient evidence to identify a specific suspect. but the investigation had gathered some information and leads. Public pressure had a significant impact on the investigation, prompting police to quickly search for evidence, but they were unable to. Because Rocio body was so badly decomposed, they were unable to determine whether she had been sexually assaulted. Police speculated that the crime was motivated by personal vendetta and deep anger, suggesting that the attacker may have been an acquaintance or someone very close to Rocio. After collecting evidence, the police conducted further interviews. First, they questioned Rocio's boyfriend, Antonio Hurat, who was the last person to see her alive and was supposed to see her that night. He gave an alibi, saying he had fallen asleep at home and had not attended the fair that day. The police also questioned all of Rocio's relatives and friends, but each had a solid alibis. A year after Rocio Wanenkoff's death, the police had narrowed down the number of suspects, and by the end of that year, they had identified a prime suspect, Dolores Vasquez. There was no evidence against Dolores, but the media led people to believe that Dolores was guilty. Dolores was the lover of Alicia, Rocio's mother. Unfortunately, journalists distorted and even fabricated the story, claiming that Alicia had accused Dolores from the first day after Rocio's death. In reality, their relationship had ended 4 years before the crime. The investigation followed the media story, focusing only on Dolores and creating a motive in the case. People speculated that Rocio may have interfered with the romantic relationship between the two. Many believed that if Rocio had not intervened, Alicia would have returned to Dolores. It was implied that Dolores had acted out of revenge against Rocio. The media and public were quick to accuse Dolores of murder when she was arrested, although she did not confess to any of the crimes. The local community was certain of her guilt, largely because police suspected that the killer was someone close to Rocio. Family members described Dolores as aggressive, violent, and extremely jealous. Alicia, meanwhile, told reporters that Dolores was both vengeful and cruel. Dolores was widely criticized by the public. Her unconventional lifestyle was a target during the trial, as it was considered unusual in Spain. The media portrayed her as a violent and cold-blooded woman who had spent 4 years plotting her hate crimes. The trial attracted a large crowd gathered outside the courthouse. Journalists have widely reported that a close family friend has been charged with Rocio's murder. Dolores is unpopular and faces an uphill battle in court. Public opinion matters in this case. Rumors and sensational media reports are likely to sway the jury's opinion. Virtually every television station has portrayed Dolores Vasquez as responsible for Rocio's death. In reality, there was no evidence against Dolores. However, it seemed that the justice system felt the need to convict someone and chose her as a scapegoat due to her questionable alibi and various flaws. Dolores was not present at the crime scene. The tire tracks did not match her car, the fabric fibers found did not come from her clothes, and the fingerprints on the trash bags did not belong to her. She also had an alibi, stating that she was babysitting her sick mother and her young niece that day, but this was ignored. Over 50 witnesses were called to testify in court. Dolores only took the stand once and stated that she did not kill Rocio and that she did not even see her that day. She asked all of Spain to find the real culprit because it was not her, and that person could have been in the courtroom at the time. She stated that there was no evidence against her and never would be because she was innocent. It is noted that the judicial system in Spain is often criticized for being inadequate and often bending the law. Prosecutors and police in Spain focus on prioritizing their theories over justice, showing a complete disregard for the legal process. The police report highlighted circumstantial evidence linking Dolores to the crime and included a psychological profile of her, as there was no physical evidence. Ultimately, the jury found Dolores Vasquez guilty of murder, resulting in a 16-year prison sentence. The verdict was met with public celebration. Rocio's funeral drew a large crowd. During this time, the Rocio family and the local community felt a growing sense of fear. This atmosphere of fear was amplified by the numerous television programs that covered the case. After Dolores's arrest, the Rocio family appeared on various programs, sharing past stories that described Dolores as cold, unfriendly, demanding, and cruel. It took years and another similar crime to reveal that Rocio Waninkoff was not killed by Dolores Vasquez. On the morning of August 15, 2003, the parents of 17-year-old Sonia Carabantes reported her missing to the police. Sonia's friends said they had dropped Sonia off at her home, but she was not there. A short distance from her home, near a tree, her parents discovered her shoes, purse, and cell phone, along with traces of blood on nearby cars. The police quickly began searching for and investigating Sonia's case. As time went on, the family's despair deepened. They searched the neighborhood, but the bloodstains on Sonia's clothes left little hope that she would be returned safely. A key piece of evidence in Sonia's case was the car's headlights. The police contacted all local auto repair shops to find a car with a broken headlight matching the description. At the same time, the police found many similarities between Rocio's and Sonia's cases. Both girls had disappeared during the fair. All employees working at the fairs in Coin and Matril were investigated, as was the case with Rocio. Flyers with Sonia's picture were widely distributed, and many people actively participated in the search for her. They not only volunteered their time, but also provided any assistance needed to help the police. Police continued their investigation. However, on the 5th day after Sonia went missing, search dogs led them to Sonia's body, which was hidden in a creek under a pile of rocks. Heavy rains the night before had washed away any evidence that could help identify her attacker. On the day of her disappearance, Sonia had been at a fair in Coin. She had said goodbye to her friends near her home, where she was then attacked. Her attacker struck her multiple times, leaving her unconscious and defenseless due to the sudden and violent nature of the attack. The attacker then abducted her by car to a remote area away from her home. Sonia suffered both internal and external injuries before being strangled, ultimately resulting in her death. Sonia was found quickly, allowing police to gather and analyze crucial evidence from her body. Colonel Paca Gabella announced that significant evidence was discovered, including biological material. This was analyzed and added to the police forensic DNA database, leading to matches with genetic material found on a cigarette butt from the Rocio Waninkoff case. When comparing the two DNA samples, they were identical. This revealed that the man who killed Rocio in 1999 was the same individual who attacked Sonia. This suggests that Dolores Vasquez, who was wrongly convicted, while the real killer is still at large, took the life of another young girl. The evidence is clear: an English cigarette butt from Rocio's case and the skin particles found under Sonia's fingernails, all linked to the same offender. On September 18, Cecilia Pantoja, a young woman, contacted the police with suspicions about her ex-husband after seeing blood on his t-shirt just days after Sonia's body was found. Cecilia also mentioned that her ex-husband was away from home twice, driving somewhere on the day of the attack on Rocio. With the help of DNA testing and Cecilia's testimony, the police were able to identify the real killer of both Rocio and Sonia as Tony Alexander King. Tony's criminal activities began as a teenager in the Holloway area of North London. In 1985, the area was hit by a series of violent attacks on women, where victims were strangled and assaulted. At the time, Tony went by his birth name, Anthony Bramwit, then 19, was convicted of strangling 5 women until they were unconscious, using a rope or cable, and then assaulting them. The judge sentenced Tony to 10 years in prison, calling him a monster for his actions. Tony served only half of his sentence and was released in 1991, but he returned to prison shortly afterwards for robbing a woman and threatening her with a knife. He changed his name to Tony Alexander King in search of a new life, married Cecilia Pantoja, and tried to have a normal family life. They had a daughter together, but Tony soon returned to his old ways. A month after Sonia's death, he was arrested. During questioning, Tony admitted to killing 2 innocent girls. After his arrest, he recounted that he followed Rocio as she walked home from her boyfriend's house and threatened her with a knife when she tried to escape. Rocio was attacked with a knife in the neck, and Tony then stabbed her 9 times. In 2005, Tony Alexander King was sentenced to 36 years in prison for kidnapping, assault, and murder of Sonia. The court also ordered Tony to pay her family about $350,000. Tony was also sentenced to 7 years in prison for intentionally causing violence against a woman in Malaga in 2001. The following year, Tony was convicted of Rocio's murder and received an additional 19-year sentence. Before the trial, Tony wrote to Sonia and Rocio's mother, begging for their forgiveness. He is currently serving his sentence at Herrera de la Mana Maximum Security Prison in Ciudad Real, Spain. After the case was over, a huge scandal broke out in Spain because the innocent Dolores Vasquez was wrongly convicted of the murder of Rocio Wanenkoff. It is hard to accept that not only can the police and the courts unfairly punish innocent people, but society can also judge and degrade them harshly. Even when a person can prove their innocence, they are still not recognized. It took more than a year to confirm that Dolores Vasquez was telling the truth and that she was completely innocent. In 2008, the Spanish Ministry of Justice offered Dolores Vasquez 120,000 euros in compensation, significantly less than the 4 million euros she had originally requested. Despite her wrongful conviction, Dolores never received an apology from the police. After being released from prison, Dolores returned to the UK. Now, more than 20 years later, Dolores has yet to receive an apology for her conviction, nor has she received any compensation since her case was closed in 2014. She works for a transport company in East London and has undergone a psychological assessment following her traumatic experience. She recently said she is still waiting for an apology after suffering from anxiety for years, which has made it difficult for her to communicate with others. The case of Dolores Vasquez, who was wrongfully imprisoned, is considered one of the most serious miscarriages of justice in Spain since 1910. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Stay Family. Family massacre cases always leave the public shocked and heartbroken, not only because of their brutality, but also due to the surprising nature of the tragedy occurring in places that seem the safest. Among the most shocking cases in the history of American justice is the Stay Family case, a tragedy that claimed 6 innocent lives and exposed the dark side of domestic violence and human psychology. Through this heartbreaking story, the courage and resilience of Cassidy Stay, the sole survivor, shine as a glimmer of hope amid the darkness of tragedy. A teenage girl answered the door when someone knocked. She found a delivery man waiting outside and informed him that her parents were not home, asking him to return later. Later, the courier came back, but this time, the situation took a turn for the worse. The Stay family lived in that house. The father, 39-year-old Stephen Stay, and his wife, 33-year-old Katie Stay. They had 5 children, 15-year-old Cassidy, 13-year-old Brian, 9-year-old Emily, 7-year-old Rebecca, and 4-year-old Zach. They were a close-knit and happy family, well known among their neighbors for their Christmas parties and Halloween celebrations. The Stay family lived in a comfortable and safe neighborhood in Houston, Texas. Stephen had been working in real estate for many years and had just started his own small agency. Katie was a dedicated housewife who focused on taking care of their children and managing household tasks, always supporting her husband. On July 9, 2014, they visited their grandmother in the morning. Later that afternoon, after returning home, Katie and Stephen went to the bank, leaving their daughter Cassidy in charge of her younger siblings. A knock sounded at the door. Cassidy opened it and saw a courier from a delivery service holding a package. She informed him that her parents were not home. Cassidy didn't see the courier's face clearly, so she asked him to come back later and shut the door. After a while, the courier returned. When she opened the door again, she repeated that her parents were not home yet. This time, she looked closely at his face and recognized him. It was Ronald Lee Haskell, her Aunt Melanie Lyon's ex-husband, who was 33 years old. When Ronald saw that Cassidy recognized him, he told her he wanted to see Melanie. Cassidy replied that Melanie was not home. Worried, she tried to quickly close the door, but this made Ronald angry. He kicked the door hard, causing Cassidy to fall to the floor. He forced his way into the house and pulled out a gun. Instead of a package, he had a folded blanket, which he planned to use as a silencer. The children were terrified, clinging to each other and pleading with Ronald to leave, but he ignored their pleas. He held them hostage while waiting for Stephen and Katie to come back. When Katie returned from the bank and entered the house, Ronald confronted them with a weapon, demanding to know where Melanie was. They refused to answer because they knew he was dangerous. That was why Melanie had divorced him, and she was hiding. Ronald took their mobile phones and ordered them to lie face down on the floor. Realizing the danger, Katie jumped up and screamed, "No!" But then, he attacked her in the face and proceeded to target each family member on the floor, aiming for the back of their heads, including the children. Zach also was shot in the shoulder. The boy got up and ran to his father, who had already been shot. Ronald approached and callously attacked Zach in the head. When it was Cassidy's turn, the bullet unexpectedly ricocheted off her head without Ronald noticing. Seeing what had happened, she lay still and silent. Ronald, believing everyone was dead, decided to leave. He grabbed the keys to the Honda parked nearby and drove away with the Stay family's car. Once he was gone, Cassidy called 911. She informed them that Ronald had shot her entire family and that everyone was dead except for her and her brother, who she could hear struggling to breathe. The police and ambulance arrived at the scene to find a horrific sight inside the house. 6 individuals were lying on the floor, hands behind their heads, in a large pool of blood. At this time, all 6 were deceased. Cassidy was the only survivor. She suffered a minor head injury, received treatment, and fully recovered. She then moved in with her maternal grandparents and was able to share the details of the brutal murder. Cassidy informed the police that Ronald had been stalking her aunt, Melanie, and harassing the entire her family. She believed that Ronald had gone to her grandparents' house, where her aunt Melanie lived. Meanwhile, the police discovered that Ronald had fled the crime scene in the Stay family's Honda, which was now considered a wanted vehicle. It was urgent to locate this dangerous criminal before he could hurt anyone else. As the police headed to Melanie's house, they spotted the Honda. Ronald's driveway was blocked, and he stopped the car, but he refused to exit. Instead, he threatened to self-harm. Surrounding him were 50 police officers, all armed, demanding that he get out of the vehicle. In response, Ronald claimed to be struggling with mental health issues and insisted on speaking with his brother, who lived in California, stating that he did not want to go to prison. Negotiations lasted 3 hours until Ronald finally exited the car. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. As a result of the murders of the Stay family, the death penalty was being considered for Ronald, who remained in jail without bail after being released from the hospital. Cassidy, along with her grandfather and uncle, attended a family memorial event where 600 colorful balloons were released. She quoted her favorite Harry Potter book saying, "Happiness can be found even in the darkest times if only you remember to turn on the light." Cassidy expressed her belief that her parents, Brian, Emily, Rebecca, and Zach, were in a better place and that she would see them again one day. She also mentioned that she is staying strong during this challenging time. The police started investigating Ronald's background and found multiple charges of domestic violence made by his ex-wife, Melanie. He and Melanie were married in California in 2002 after having known each other since elementary school. They moved from their hometown to Utah, where Ronald deliberately cut Melanie off from her family. Problems arose almost immediately after their wedding, as he manipulated her into feeling unwanted by everyone, including her relatives. Throughout their marriage, Ronald subjected Melanie to physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. They had 4 children together, and he even assaulted Melanie during her pregnancies, eventually directing his violence towards the children as well. Ronald had a low income as a courier, which made it difficult to support their large family. Despite their financial struggles, he did not allow Melanie to work or leave the house, isolating her from anyone who could help. In 2008, Melanie seized a chance to contact the police when Ronald accidentally left his phone unattended after physically assaulting her. She was taken to the hospital, and Ronald received an 8-month suspended sentence. Unfortunately, this punishment did not stop him. The abuse started again as soon as she returned home. Ronald grew even more aggressive and threatened to kill her family if she reported him again, causing her to live in constant fear. By 2013, Melanie could no longer tolerate her situation. She and her children left their home while Ronald was at work and sought safety in a shelter. She filed for divorce and obtained a restraining order against Ronald. In need of support, she reached out to her sister, Katie. Despite not being very close, Katie felt compelled to help her sister and took Melanie and her 4 children to their parents' house in Houston, Texas, where they would be safe. Melanie's divorce from Ronald was finalized on February 14, 2014. They were granted joint custody of the children, with Melanie receiving primary custody. Ronald was ordered to pay $700 a month in alimony from his modest income. After the divorce, Ronald moved in with his parents in California. He was ordered to stay away from Melanie, her family, and the children's school. To evaluate his emotional stability and communication skills with the children, he was required to undergo a psychological examination, but he never succeeded. While living with his parents, Ronald began to take out his frustrations on them, physically abusing his elderly parents and older sister. In a disturbing incident, when he learned that his mother had been in contact with Melanie, he attacked her, bound her to a chair, and choked her until she lost consciousness. His sister eventually discovered their mother and called the police, but Ronald managed to avoid serious repercussions and continued the abuse towards his family. Ronald's family found it hard to understand why he had become so cruel, especially given that he was raised in a loving environment. In school, he was a popular football player, crowned prom king, and had many female friends. No one could believe that the friendly and cheerful Ronald would turn into a violent person. And in a moment of anger, Ronald sought revenge on his ex-wife. Tragically, he ended up killing his stay's family instead. The police was discovered that Ronald did not own any registered firearms. He had stolen a pistol from his ex-girlfriend and bought over 200 rounds of ammunition from a weapons store. A ballistic test confirmed that the pistol found with him matched the bullets found at the murder scene. Additionally, notes outlining his murder plans were discovered in his notebook, showing that he originally intended to kill Melanie, her parents, and her sister as part of his revenge. It is clear that Ronald had planned this horrific act and intended to kill many people. If Cassidy had not quickly called 911 and the police had not intervened, Ronald would have killed Melanie, her parents, and possibly others. A memorial was set up in front of the deceased family's home, where neighbors and community members brought flowers to honor their memory. Melanie did feel guilty for her ex-husband's actions and found it difficult to understand why he chose to kill Katie and Katie's family instead of her. At this time, the court was significantly affected by damage caused by a storm, resulting in a delay in the trial. It wasn't until August 25, 2019, that the trial finally started, with Ronald facing the death penalty. Ronald fainted during the proceedings and had to be placed in a wheelchair. His lawyer claimed that he was scared and required a mental health assessment. A psychiatric evaluation revealed changes in his behavior, and he was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. The psychiatrist believed he was pretending to have a mental illness to evade responsibility for his actions. Ronald had previously been diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder while living with his parents and had attempted suicide 3 times without success. Ronald confessed to killing Stay's family, but said that voices in his head urged him to do it. He claimed he wasn't aware of his actions at the time. However, the prosecution presented CCTV footage showing Ronald at a hotel, a store, and a cinema before the murder. In the footage, he appeared calm and rational, which suggested he was not insane. The defendant's brother stated that Ronald was extremely angry with Katie, who aided Melanie and the children in their escape. He wanted to take revenge on her. Melanie corroborated this by saying he had been stalking her and had threatened to kill the entire her family. Notes found in his notebook indicated that he had been planning these actions for several months, showing that this was not a result of sudden insanity. In court, Cassidy also was the key witness against Ronald. She had grown up significantly and was a student at the University of Brickmayanka in Utah, where she was also engaged to her boyfriend. Cassidy recounted the terrifying experiences she had in the house during the murder and was shocked that Ronald showed no remorse for his actions. Throughout the 5 years he spent in prison awaiting trial, he did not reflect on his crime or feel any regret. Finally, Ronald was found guilty and sentenced to death by lethal injection. He is currently on death row waiting for his execution. The Stay family massacre is not only a tragic loss, but also a profound reminder of the impact of domestic violence and the dangers of leaving mental health issues untreated. Although the pain Cassidy Stay endured is immeasurable, she chose to use her loss as motivation to spread a message of courage and mental strength. The Stay family's story not only reminds us of the importance of protecting our loved ones, but it also inspires each person to feel a sense of responsibility to the community in preventing and resolving violence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rosalia Jara. Rosalia Daniela Jara was born on September 12, 1997 in Fort Ole, a small town in the Vera department of Santa Fe, Argentina. She grew up in a close-knit family with limited means. Her mother, Liliana Jara, was the head of the family. Rosalia spent her childhood and adolescence in Fortin, where she attended primary school in a neighborhood called San Jose Obre. She aspired to become either a teacher or a police officer. She is known to be kind and thoughtful, especially to her family. When she was in 6th grade, she met Juan Oscar Valdez, a teacher, and they quickly secretly dated each other. At the time, she was only 13 years old, while Juan was 32 and married. Rosalia only shared this relationship with her sister, and her mother only found out when she became pregnant. After Rosalia gave birth to a daughter named Alma, Juan distanced himself and refused to acknowledge Alma's as his child. About a year later, Rosalia began living with a man named Aldo. There was a large age difference between them. This relationship did not go very well, and after another conflict, they decided to break up. On Saturday, July 1, 2017, Rosalia visited her mother Liliana, asking her to take care of her 2-year-old daughter, Alma. After that, Rosalia left home, taking very few belongings. Liliana assumed that Rosalia would be back soon, but that was not the case. That evening, Rosalia wears a red sports jacket, blue jeans, and new pink sneakers. Rumor has it that she went out to play cards with the US $20 she borrowed. She claimed she needed to make some money and wanted to try her luck. Around 9:00 p.m., Liliana called Rosalia, who said she was at a bar, enjoying the evening with friends while playing 5-card stud poker. She didn't mention anything concerning during their conversation, and this was the last time they spoke. Around 10:00 p.m., Rosalia was seen leaving a bar while talking on her cell phone and heading towards a checkpoint. After midnight, her mother, Liliana, tried repeatedly to reach her, but received no response. The following day, her mother went to the city police station to report her daughter, Rosalia, missing. Liliana found it unusual that she had not returned home, as Liliana knew how much her daughter valued family. However, the police were not interested in what Liliana said and refused to conduct a search. They argued that Rosalia, 19 years old, may have voluntarily left home. Days passed, and local authorities took no action to find Rosalia. A week after she went missing, local feminist groups organized a protest to pressure law enforcement. On the 11th day since she disappearance, authorities finally began search operations in Fort Ole and nearby areas. They conducted a careful search of the area and eventually discovered several items believed to belong to Rosalia. However, these findings did not help them find her. It is worth noting that after Rosalia went missing, most of the authorities' attention was focused on Juan. The police discovered that he left his home around 9 p.m. on July 1, driving a white Toyota Corolla, which partially matched the route Rosalia was believed to have taken. He returned home after 1 a.m. Witnesses near the bar reported seeing a similar white car with tinted windows around that time. Apparently, Juan was aware that the police suspected him of being involved in Rosalia's disappearance, which explains why he damaged his phone right before the authorities confiscated his phone. Rosalia's call history and phone location analysis revealed some important information, data related to Juan. On the night of her disappearance, there were about 20 calls between their two mobile numbers, most of which were initiated by Juan. Additionally, geolocation data from antenna signals indicated that Rosalia's and Juan's phones were close to each other at one point. Additionally, GPS data also showed that Juan's car was in the area during that time. Based on evidence and testimony from several witnesses, Juan was arrested in late July 2017. In early August 2017, the police organized a series of operations to clarify the chronology of incident related to Rosalia's disappearance. A representative of the Ministry of Security confirmed that during these operations, several searches took place simultaneously. One search took place at the local health department, while two others were organized at the homes of several police officers who were later suspected. The main goal of the search at the medical center was to find evidence suggesting that Rosalia may have had an abortion shortly before she went missing. However, this hypothesis was dismissed. Meanwhile, the search for Rosalia, the missing girl, continued. The main suspect, Juan, refused to testify about his relationship with her and about the many calls he made on the day she was last seen. In April 2018, during a hearing in the city of Vera, the judge rejected a request from Juan's lawyer to allow him to remain free. The judge decided that he should remain in custody indefinitely, as there was still a risk that he could influence witnesses. However, Juan's lawyer stated that the prosecution lacked evidence to link he to the crime. The lawyer emphasized that he had been cooperating with authorities from the start. The lawyer also dismissed the prosecution's claim that Juan intentionally damaged his phone to destroy evidence. On August 26, 2018, two hunters discovered human remains near a stream in the city of Londrina. The remains included a skull and several bone fragments. Alongside these, a pink sports jacket, sneakers, and other personal items believed to belong to the victim were found. Rosalia's family identified most of these items. The remains were sent to the Institute of Forensic Medicine for anthropological analysis. Police then went to the home of Aldo, Rosalia's ex-boyfriend, where she had lived prior to her disappearance. With Aldo's permission, they searched the house for a lock that matched a key found in the sports jacket's pocket. However, Aldo explained that he had to break the front door locks because he had not lived there for a long time and didn't know where his keys were. On September 8, 2018, investigative police officers conducted several procedures related to this case. The first procedure took place at the Municipal Health Service Department, where blood samples were taken from Liliana and her granddaughter Alma. The aim is to determine whether their DNA matches that of the remains that have been found. The Argentine Institute of Forensic Medicine confirmed that the remains found belonged to Rosalia, with a nearly 100% probability. Although forensic experts were unable to determine the cause of her death, it was clear that she had been murdered by violence, as evidenced by severe injuries to her left cheekbone, which had destroyed her skull. For Gustavo Monzon, the prosecutor in charge of the case, the evidence collected became a crucial step in the investigation. After completing all procedures, Rosalia's remains were returned to her family for burial. After it was confirmed that she had died from physical abuse, the State Attorney General's office decided to change the crime classification to homicide. More than a year and a half after her disappearance, the case finally moved to the public trial stage. In 2018, Juan Valdez was charged with Rosalia's murder. His lawyer has objected to this, arguing that the actual reasons for Rosalia's death were not determined. After hearing this, the court ordered the exhumation of her remains for further examination. Several months later, the original judge was dismissed due to allegations of bias against Juan. On July 2, 2019, the new judge began reviewing the case and denied Juan's attorney's request to revoke the pretrial detention order. Local media have been regularly reporting on key points in the investigation. In particular, Attorney General Gustavo Monzon has suggested that Juan killed Rosalia simply because she asked for child support for Alma, whom Juan acknowledged as his child. Gustavo claimed that just a day before Rosalia's disappearance, she had called Juan to voice her frustrations about his refusal to help with child support. Returning to the trial, it is important to clarify the prosecution's main hypothesis. On Saturday, July 1, 2017, while Juan's wife was away, he contacted Rosalia to discuss their meeting. As previously mentioned, he and she had multiple phone calls that day, with the last call initiated by Juan. This call lasted no more than 30 seconds, but it was enough for he to specify the exact time and place for their meeting. It is believed that when he met she, he used force to make her get into his car and turned off her mobile phone. From that moment on, her phone no longer had a signal. According to the timeline created by the prosecutors, Juan drove towards the municipality of Landry. At some point during the drive, he allegedly struck Rosalia on the head, leading to her death. He then drove a few more kilometers to a stream to dispose of her body. During the hearing, the prosecutor presented all the evidence related to the case. In addition to the report from the experts of the Institute of Forensic Medicine, the prosecution had witness testimony, autopsy reports, DNA analysis results, and forensic reports. The case documents include information from telephone company, such as call records, text messages, and geolocation information. This information fully corroborates the main version of the prosecution. Additionally, the prosecutor's team had testimony from Juan's 20-year-old stepdaughter, Macarena. She said that Juan left home around 9 p.m. that night, and she did not see him return. This contradicts Juan's testimony, which states that on the day of the incident, he went to bed early and did not leave the house. Another piece of indirect evidence presented by the prosecution was related to Juan's inappropriate behavior towards teenage girls. This evidence was based on the testimony of a female student. She reported that he had subjected her to indecent acts when she was just 12 years old. Additionally, there was other evidence that Juan had problems at the school, where he occasionally taught, all related to his relationships with minors. In November 2019, Rosalia's family changed their lawyer. By March 2020, their new lawyer, Caroline Walker, stated that after reviewing the case documents, she discovered that the investigation had overlooked several important elements. Curiously, Juan was not prosecuted for sexually assaulting Rosalia. even though their romantic relationship started long before she turned 18. Caroline also realized that as she gathered evidence against Juan, he was clearly a dangerous predator. For this reason, she did not rule out the possibility of future cases related to these crimes. The main trial took place at the Vera Municipal Court on Tuesday, July 7, 2020. This was 3 years after the disappearance and 2 years after the discovery of Rosalia's remains. Only the main representatives of the parties attended the trial. Other members, journalists, and many experts were in other rooms of the court. Given the case's significance and the announced restrictions, various feminist groups supporting Rosalia's family requested authorities to broadcast the trial daily. In his opening speech, Prosecutor Gustavo stated that he would seek a life sentence for Juan. There were several reasons for this decision, the most important of which was that Rosalia had been in an unequal relationship with him. Juan not only controlled her, but also dominated her in social relationships. Furthermore, he has consistently failed to acknowledge their common child, Alma. Therefore, the punishment Gustavo proposed, that is, life imprisonment, was entirely appropriate to the extent of the damage Juan had caused to all members of Rosalia's family. Caroline Walker, the lawyer representing Rosalia's family, criticized the authorities for their initial response when Rosalia was reported missing. She noted that the authorities were initially not proactive in searching for Rosalia and did not take the case seriously. Additionally, she stressed that Rosalia's remains were not discovered by law enforcement officers, but were found by 2 hunters. She also said that in her opinion, a police officer informed Juan about the investigation. This led to some important information being leaked, which could have helped him disappear just before his arrest. The trial lasted about a month and featured around 100 expert testimonies. Details of the phone calls between Rosalia and Juan on the day of her disappearance were also presented. It was revealed that he made the last call shortly after she left the bar, and her phone was turned off soon after. Several witnesses reported seeing a similar white car near the bar that evening. Juan was also seen leaving the house around 9:00 p.m., and a while later he came back. Prosecutors argued that this brief time frame was sufficient for him to commit the crime and dispose of the evidence. Additionally, another important piece of evidence was geolocation data from the phones, which showed that Juan and Rosalia's phones were in close proximity for a period of time. The prosecution delivered a strong closing argument, presenting both direct and indirect evidence that confirmed Juan Valdez's guilt in the crime. They firmly believed that Rosalia's life was ended due to a violent act by he, although the exact cause of death was not determined. But forensic experts believed that she could have died from a severe blow to the left cheekbone. Juan also had the opportunity to defend himself. He attempted to dispute all the evidence presented by the authorities, particularly denying allegations that he intentionally damaged his mobile phone. Furthermore, Juan argued that the authorities had made a serious mistake by focusing on him, which had led to a failure to identify who had actually harmed Rosalia. On August 3, 2020, the much-awaited verdict was announced. The court found Juan Oscar Valdez guilty on all charges. He listened to his sentence with his eyes downcast. Outside the courtroom, many young people from various human rights organizations had gathered to show support for Rosalia's family and to follow the trial's progress. Shortly after the guilty verdict, Juan's lawyer filed an appeal against the trial court's decision. During the appeal, Juan's lawyer argued that the prosecution had not presented clear evidence to prove that Rosalia had actually gotten into Juan's car on the day she disappeared. Additionally, the lawyer also argued that Aldo, her last boyfriend, whom she had accused of sexual assault, was the one people should suspect. The defense also stressed that the fact that Juan had a daughter with Rosalia did not prove that he had a motive to commit a serious crime. The prosecution aimed to counter the arguments made by Juan's lawyer. They said that from the beginning of the investigation, they considered many theories, but all were discarded when the evidence pointed to Juan as the perpetrator. Caroline Walker, the lawyer representing Rosalia's family, agreed with the prosecution's position. On October 7, 2021, the Vera Court of Appeals issued a unanimous 3-judge decision. They did not accept the appeal and request to overturn the sentence that Juan's lawyer had filed. Therefore, the previous judgment of the trial court, according to which Juan was sentenced to life in prison, remained in place. In addition, the prosecutor's office was asked to conduct an internal investigation into the misconduct of some of the police officers involved. Rosalia's case became a symbol of solidarity and feminist movements in the northern province of Santa Fe. It highlighted the issue of gender violence in local media and sparked discussions during political debates. Although Rosalia's family achieved justice, it did not erase their pain. Hi everyone. Thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Veronica Youngblood. 30 years old, Veronica Youngblood originally came from Argentina. The exact timing of her move to the United States is unclear, but she grew up in poverty. At the young age of 16, she gave birth to her first daughter, Sharon. At that time, she started working as a call girl to support herself and earn money. In 2007, she met Ronald Youngblood, a pilot in the U.S. Navy, who was one of her clients. They quickly started dating, and in 2009, they got married in Las Vegas. Marrying Ronald brought stability to Veronica's life, offering her a home, a supportive husband, and assistance in caring for her daughter. A few years later, in 2012, Veronica and Ronald welcomed a daughter together named Brooklyn. Sharon is described as a sweet and kind girl who is always willing to help others. She is currently in 10th grade at Octina High School and participates in figure skating. Coach Lynette Carroll, who has coached she for about 4 years, commented that she is a persistent and hardworking athlete who has performed well in competitions. Sharon was a good student with a bright future ahead of her. She often talks about her dream of becoming a singer and has a great group of friends, which makes her popular. Brooklyn, 5, is a smart, loving little girl who loves animals. She is adored by her family. However, the relationship between her parents, Veronica and Ronald, is strained. They often argued, which prompted the police to intervene. In 2014, while Ronald and his family were in Honduras, she called the local police to report that she and Ronald had a disagreement, during which he became physically violent. During this time, the family said Ronald began to suspect Veronica of having an affair. After that, their relationship deteriorated, and some people said he became more domineering, jealous, and possessive. They said that while in Honduras, he began denying his wife access to transportation, money, and even the internet. At one point, Veronica sought assistance from the U.S. Embassy to facilitate her emergency return to the United States, which was granted. After their time in Honduras, Ronald was assigned to the Navy Department in Washington, D.C., and they moved to Florida. There, they effectively separated, but continued to live together. Following their time in Florida, they relocated with their children to Oakton, Virginia, and began divorce proceedings. They continued to live in the same house though, possibly because they wanted to raise their 2 daughters together and because Veronica was unemployed, so could not afford to live independently. However, the divorce proceedings and child custody battle put further strain on their relationship. During this process, Veronica applied for student loans and named Ronald as a guarantor without his consent. This led to a number of disputes. By September 2016, the court decided that they could continue living together in Oakton and have joint custody of their daughter Brooklyn, without either party having to pay alimony. In October 2016, Ronald filed for a protective order to protect himself from Veronica. He alleged that she took his phone and threw it in the toilet, poured water on his laptop, and scratched his car. As a result, the court ordered she to move out of their shared home and maintain a distance of 500 feet from Ronald and Brooklyn until a hearing, scheduled for 2 weeks later. The hearing was finalized on October 31, 2016. and the divorce was finalized. After the hearing, Veronica most likely moved back into the marital home because she and Ronald began living together again. Everything went smoothly until March 2018, when Ronald and Veronica failed to appear in court. They filed a joint consent form for a 14 years project that stated they both wanted to move to Sedalia, Missouri, with their 2 daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn, in August 2018. They chose Missouri because that's where most of Ronald's family lives. The agreement that the two signed and filed with the court stated that Veronica would be given her own apartment, 30 miles away from Ronald's home, and that he would be responsible for paying rent for the next 3 years. During this period, they would share joint custody of their daughter, Brooklyn. The court approved this arrangement, and the move was planned. However, on April 13, 2018, she changed her mind about moving, hired a new lawyer, and sought to change the custody agreement. She explained that her situation had changed since the initial agreement was filed. Veronica said she had gotten a good-paying job and would work full-time, but to do this, she needed to stay in Virginia. She also said that she was in the process of buying her own home so that she could live independently of Ronald without his support. In her revised request, she sought full custody of Brooklyn, with the intention of letting their daughter live with her. The dispute between Ronald and Veronica was adjudicated in July 2018. The decision was made that there was no change. Both parties still had to move to Missouri as previously agreed. By August 2018, the judge refused to change the decision, and both parties signed this document to agree. 10 days later, Ronald notified the court of his new address in Missouri, where he planned to move in mid-August 2018. Sadly, this move would never take place. On August 5, 2018, 911 operator Jennifer Hoffman received a call from a 15-year-old girl who was crying out in pain. Sharon pleaded for help, saying she has just been attacked. When Jennifer asked who attacked her, she responded, "Her mother, Veronica." Sharon said her mother came into room while she and her younger sister, Brooklyn, were sleeping. Her mother said she was going to take her to God, then attacked her. Jennifer tried to reassure Sharon, informing her that help was on the way and to stay calm. However, Jennifer then heard the girl screaming and moaning in pain, repeatedly pleading. She said she didn't want to die. Please help her. Finally, in the evening, the rescue team arrived at the apartment on Lincoln Street. They found Sharon alive, with 2 wounds, one in the back and one in the chest. Tragically, her little sister Brooklyn was discovered dead in her bed due to injury to the head. Sharon was still alive at the time, but in critical condition. She was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she did not survive. She fought bravely, but died just a few days later. When police arrived at the scene, they did not find Ronald or Veronica. Later that evening, they located Veronica. She went to a friend's house and knocked on the door, with a gun in her hand. Her friend called 911, leading to her swift detention. Upon her arrest, officers discovered she still had the gun with her and was driving a rental car. The police also found 2 ammunition magazines for the weapon. During her interrogation just a few hours later, Veronica confessed that she had bought the gun with plans to kill her daughters, Ronald and Veronica. Then she will die too. She mentioned that she was unhappy with her life, but did not elaborate further. The police later learned that immediately after the shootings, she called Ronald to inform him that she had killed their daughters, and she intended to die as well, adding that she hated him. During the police interrogation, Veronica confessed to her guilt. When the investigator asked what punishment she thought she deserved, she stated it should be the death penalty. Although Virginia has abolished the death penalty, the officers present during the interrogation noted that she spoke in a flat, emotionless manner throughout. As a result, she was charged with first-degree murder for the deaths of her 2 children. At her initial court hearing, she indicated that she did not require a public defender and did not want to hire a private attorney. However, eventually, she hired a lawyer. And at her plea hearing, she pleaded guilty, citing insanity. Veronica delayed each court hearing in her case. The next hearing was pushed back for several months because she repeatedly refused to leave prison to attend. Ultimately, the murder trial began in March 2023. Recently, the prosecution argued that she was not insane. Instead, they claimed she had carefully planned the murders of her daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn, as revenge against her ex-husband, Ronald. The murder occurred just days before Brooklyn and Ronald moved to Missouri. Veronica had just gone through a difficult divorce and was trying to get revenge. The prosecution presented a detailed timeline, demonstrating the premeditation behind the crimes. 9 days before the murders, Veronica attended a local gun show and purchased a gun. Prosecutors allege she did this with the intention of killing both her daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn. On the day before the shootings, Sharon asked Veronica if her mother had planned to kill her and Brooklyn, and if so, that would be horrible. The prosecution contended that Veronica had been plotting the murders for several days. On the day of the crime, they claimed she gave both children chewing gum laced with sleeping pills to incapacitate them. She then went into each room and attacked each of his daughters. During the investigation, it was discovered that Veronica had attacked Brooklyn in the head, causing her instant death. For Sharon, after the first attack, little girl woke up and started screaming. She asked her mother why she had shot her, and her mother replied that little girl was going to see God. Veronica then struck her again in the chest and left the apartment. Finally, Veronica called Ronald and left a voice message saying, "She killed Brooklyn, she killed Sharon, and she will die. She hates him. Goodbye." The prosecution alleged that Veronica was a liar and a manipulator. They said she caused chaos and shirked responsibility for her own gain. They described her as cruel, selfish, vengeful, and calculating. They claimed that she planned and executed the murder plot to get revenge on her ex-husband, Ronald. The defense, on the other hand, argued that she was suffering from psychological problems. They said she had been abused by a cruel man who had physically and mentally abused her. The defense claimed that Ronald never loved her and that she had suffered abuse since childhood. The lawyers again pointed to the poverty that Veronica and her younger sister lived in. They said she had suffered abuse from her grandfather and daily beatings from her parents, to the point where she was at one point unable to walk. Her father would often beat her with tree branches, belts, and brooms. After years of living in such cruel conditions, her parents abandoned she and her younger sister without a word, leaving them to fend for themselves. Then, Veronica was forced to turn to sex work to provide for her daughter and support her sister. During the proceedings, her younger sister gave a statement in which mentions that since childhood, she has followed a South American religion called Umbanda. This religion believes in the existence of a supreme creator, the ability to communicate with the spirits of the dead, and the concept of reincarnation, spiritual growth, through various practices. The defense used this information to argue that Veronica believed she had the ability to communicate with the dead. The defense argued that Veronica had suffered abuse and neglect in her past, and that in addition to these factors, she suffered from severe mental illness. She reported having heard voices throughout her life. At trial, she claimed that she had heard voices that night, leading her to believe that she had to kill her daughters. The defense argued that she suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. They asserted that she was terrified that her children would experience the same abuse she endured as a child if they were separated from her. Veronica's defense team said she went to the police and asked for the death penalty. This shows that she intends to die. During the trial, various witnesses, including doctors who attempted to save Sharon's life and people who knew Veronica, Ronald during their marriage, provided testimony. One of the witnesses was Manuel, a defense attorney, who met Veronica by chance at the time of the incident. He shared that they met in the summer of 2018, and when they first met, she seemed calm and composed. However, by the end of July, things had changed. Manuel said that in late July, Veronica shared with him that she had lost her nursing job, which would have prevented her from moving to Missouri, as she had said in court. During their conversations, she expressed a desire for a more serious relationship, but he responded that he was not ready for a serious relationship. Therefore, the two decided to end their relationship at that time. A few days later, she sent him a text claiming she was pregnant with his child. On July 31st, he visited her home to discuss the pregnancy. Upon arrival, he noticed the apartment was dark, lit only by candles, which created a romantic atmosphere. Although they talked, but he soon left because he felt unsafe. He said that after that conversation, he no longer trusted Veronica's word about her pregnancy. He didn't believe anything she said. It is highly unlikely that she was pregnant, as there were no reports from the prison indicating that she had given birth or experienced a miscarriage. After their conversation, Manuel instructed his lawyer to send Veronica a letter, telling her not to contact him again. He mentioned that he saw she again on August 5, when she appeared at his doorstep. She was calm and seemed cold, asking to come in. However, he refused to open the door and asked her to leave. Veronica advised Manuel to call the police, as they were looking for her. When he inquired why the police were looking for her, she revealed, because she just killed her daughters. At that point, she pulled a gun from her belt and explained her actions to him. Following this, he called 911 to report her location. During the trial, the focus turned to Sharon's 911 call, in which little girl told the dispatcher that she was dying because her mother had just attacked her. At that moment, Veronica stood up and cried out. Veronica couldn't take it anymore. The judge decided to adjourn the trial and informed the jury that Veronica had asked for a waiver because she had interrupted the hearing. Veronica then testified, with tears streaming down her face, about the trauma she had endured. The jury and several others in attendance were moved to tears as she shared the horrors of her life. Ronald attended the trial. He also took the stand to speak about how wonderful his daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn, were, expressing his deep love for them and his devastation over the incident. The prosecution's strong arguments convinced the jury to find Veronica guilty. She purchased the gun 9 days before the murder and had given her daughters sleeping medication beforehand, leaving them defenseless. This clearly indicated that she had planned the act well in advance. It was not a spontaneous decision made in a moment of madness. On the final day, she followed through with her plan, reinforcing that this was not an impulsive act. Veronica claimed that she was mentally ill and did not intend to commit the crime. She had endured abuse throughout her life, which contributed to her mental health struggles. She believed that her actions were meant to protect her daughters from the same abuse she experienced as a child. After a 2-week trial, the jury began their deliberations and returned the next day with a verdict. They determined that Veronica was not insane at the time of the crime and found her guilty of first-degree murder for the deaths of Brooklyn and Sharon, as well as for using a firearm during the commission of the crime. During the sentencing phase, the jury decided that prison was the appropriate consequence for Veronica. Upon hearing her sentence, Veronica reacted with anger, shouting, "No, no," and leaping from her chair. Court officials had to escort her out of the courtroom. Then, she was taken back to prison, under special surveillance. A few days later, the jury returned to impose a sentence of 36 years in prison for each murder and an additional 3 years for each firearm offense. In total, Veronica will serve 78 years in prison. Throughout their relationship, Ronald and Veronica both caused each other harm. She may have had some psychological issues, believing that harming her daughters would get back at her ex-husband, Ronald. However, he is not without fault either, and many of Veronica's past experiences likely shaped her personality and her relationship with he. If Veronica feared her daughters would suffer the same abuse she endured as a child, it's important to note that she had full custody of Sharon, and only Brooklyn had to leave. She needed to move to Missouri, a plan she had agreed upon with Ronald. If she had followed through with this move, Brooklyn would not have been so far away from her. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case, the case of Peter Vlasiuk. There are cases that shock the public, not only because of their brutality, but also due to the elaborate plots to conceal the truth. The story of Peter Vlasiuk and the mysterious death of his wife, Patty Vlasiuk, is one of those cases. What began as a reported truck accident gradually revealed suspicious clues that could not be ignored. This case serves as a lesson about trust and conflicts in close relationships. So, how does this story unfold? Let's watch today's video together. Patty Vlasiuk, also known as Patricia Vlasiuk, was born on February 19, 1967, in this hit England. Later, her family moved to the city of Strong, New York State. She grew up and became a certified nurse, working in a hospital. Peter Vlasiuk was born on February 9, 1969, in New Jersey. After school, he went to the Army and later worked as a truck driver, in which he transported new cars. When Peter was visiting relatives in Sydney, he met Patty. He moved to this area, and the couple eloped to Las Vegas in 1996. Peter got married to Patty, who at that time was already a mother from a previous marriage. The Vlasiuk family had 3 daughters, Ashley, Jolene, and Rebecca. In 1997, they bought a house with a swimming pool and opened their family business, Bar Angel. Peter worked enthusiastically on the design of the establishment, creating a dance floor with wood and a stage on which various musical groups performed. Things in the family were going well. The bar was very popular with local residents. Peter loved to flirt with visitors to the bar, and there were rumors that he had affairs on the side. Peter loved to give gifts to please Patty, and on her 35th birthday, he gave her a new ultra-modern stethoscope and tonometer, arranging a great party. On April 3, 2002, he went to the bar in his pickup. In the evening, he came home and started waiting for his wife, thinking that she had picked up the children after work. When she did not call him around 20:30, he began to worry and asked if she knew where the children was. Soon after that, Patty arrived home without the children. Peter asked her why she didn't pick up the kids, and they argued because Patty thought he would pick them up. While driving the pickup and smoking, Patty, for a second, tried to shake off the ashes of a cigarette when a deer came out onto the road. She sharply turned the wheel to avoid a collision, and the car fell into the lake. Peter was able to open his passenger door and get out of the sinking car. He tried to pull his wife out but couldn't. The water was very cold, and he got out of the water faster. The man ran for help to the nearest houses, knocking on doors, but no one opened. Finally, in one house, Jessica Becker and Thomas, Peter's friend, opened the door. Thomas called 911 while waiting for rescuers. Later, they arrived at the lake where a white pickup truck was visible about 10 meters from the shore. Thomas put on a wetsuit and fins and dived under the water to the car, but didn't find Patty. The rescuers who arrived with a team of scuba divers pulled her out of the cold lake and found her face down, 2 meters from the car, which was submerged in 4 meters of water. She was taken to the same hospital where she had worked for 17 years, but died shortly after her arrival. Peter was also taken to the hospital by ambulance, where he was warmed up and changed into dry clothes. During the interrogation, Peter told the story about the deer and added that Patty liked to drink, which was true. Patty had several violations for drunk driving, but that night when she died, the alcohol content was insignificant, as shown by the toxicological examination. The investigators checked Peter's story and noticed that there were no skid marks on the road and that the car fell exactly in that place of the road where there was no fence. This was strange. The police also took the pickup truck out of the lake, and experts began to study its door, which Peter said opened in the water. The door was closed from the inside, which meant he could not have opened it. Later, he began to claim that he climbed out through the window. It was also strange that there was a burdock found in Patty's hair that did not grow near the lake. According to Peter, she would return to work, and they immediately pick up the kids. She did not lie on the ground and did not walk so that the thorns of the burdock would cling. The investigators visited Vlasiek's house and discovered some plants nearby. They found a burdock plant with a broken branch and strands of hair. Peter's boots were covered in several thorns. Divers searched the lakebed for burdock but could not locate any. However, they did find Peter's coat submerged in the water, which had repellent on it. Besides, inside one of the pockets, they discovered her driver's license. During lab analysis, more items were uncovered in the pockets, including a toolbox that had been found at the bottom of the lake but had not been opened. Patty had bruises and wounds on her body, including her neck, but the pathologist, James Terzian, determined that drowning was the cause of death. The inconsistencies in the case made investigators uneasy, prompting them to investigate further for clues. They discovered a strange video involving an intimate relationship between three people filming their children, husband and wife, Vlasiek, and Joyce Warden, nanny of their children. Just 9 hours after his wife's death, Peter contacted the insurance company to claim over $150,000 in life insurance payments. This raised the suspicions of the police, leading them to investigate further. As a result, Peter became the primary suspect. Investigators believed that on the night of April 3, 2002, Peter had left their children with a nanny and went to kill Patty near their home. After she had consumed alcohol, he is suspected of killing her, possibly strangling her, as indicated by the petechiae found on her neck, which are small pinpoint hemorrhages. Following the attack, he allegedly dragged her body through the grass, which could explain the burdock stuck in her hair and on his shoes. He then placed her in a truck, drove to the lake, and pushed the vehicle into the water. A new discovery is, Peter wanted Joyce Warden to be his new girlfriend. He sought full custody of their children and aimed to use life insurance money to pay off his debts. The police reached out to the pathologist conducting the autopsy about the burrs found in Patty's hair and coat. This led the pathologist to reconsider the cause of death and conclude that she had been strangled. From the evidence collected, on April 8, 2002, the police arrested Peter and detained him without bail. The trial started a few months later. Joyce Cardozo, Patty's mother, attended every day with her adult children, Lori, and her grandchildren, William. In court, Peter testified that Patty had been singing and drinking. He said that he asked Patty to stop, which made her so angry that she drove off the road into a lake and refused to get out of the sinking car. Peter claimed he mentioned a deer to the police to protect his wife's reputation, worrying that they might take away her nursing license. However, Peter's brother did not confirm that Patty had been drinking, and the prosecution argued that alcohol was not related to the case at all. A toxicology report indicated that there was only a very small amount of alcohol in Patty's system after the accident. The defense argued that burdock could not have become tangled in her hair while she was in the water. The lawyer pointed out that in April, the ground was muddy after the snow had melted, yet Patty had no dirt on her shoes, clothes, or hair. Additionally, there were no indications of a struggle near the pickup. They were simply in the yard by the bushes. Other than some hair on Patty's body, there was no dirt found beneath her fingernails. In reply, the prosecutor argued that the water could have washed away any dirt. In court, Joyce Warden revealed that it was actually Patty who started the group relationship, not Peter, surprising everyone present. She also confessed to having an intimate relationship with Peter, separate from his wife. Peter's mother testified that Peter consumed a significant amount of alcohol and recalled finding 20 large cans of beer near their home one day. Additionally, she noted that Peter quickly contacted the insurance company regarding payment, and she encouraged him to do so because they needed the money. During the trial, Patty's co-workers stated that she was in a good mood when she arrived at work that day. However, in the afternoon, she had an argument with her husband, which left her very upset. Her colleagues suggested that she should divorce him, but Patty insisted that she still loved him. One co-worker claimed that Patty told her Peter had threatened Patty with a gun during the argument. Additionally, a neighbor living near the Guilford Lake, Jessica Becker, testified that when Peter rushed to their house for help, his hair was dry, even though he had supposedly just come out of the water. A regular at the bar also testified in court that Peter once boasted about being able to make murders appear accidental. Marlene Martin, one of the rescuers who responded at the lake, reported that Peter was pretending to have hypothermia on the night of the incident. She noticed he was sitting still until he saw her, after which he started shaking and spoke in a remorseful tone. The medical examiner for the prosecution stated that Patty had no water in her lungs, suggesting that she may have been choked before entering the water. Chief pathologist Safa Naman supported this conclusion. The jury convicted Peter, sentencing him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In the courtroom, many people, including law enforcement officers and Patty's sisters, embraced and shook hands. Patty's mother expressed her disbelief, saying, "I am still in a state of shock. I did not suspect Peter until he was arrested." She struggled to accept the situation. Peter's parents took custody of his children, while Patty's children from her first marriage began living with their mother. Peter filed several appeals. In one interview, he expressed frustration about being unable to obtain justice due to his lack of wealth, in spite of 2 of his appeals were accepted. Peter decided to change his lawyer because he felt the previous one was not effective, and he even hired a private detective. David Burrs, the detective, had 34 years of experience in the police force and understood the system well. He discovered some inaccuracies and irregularities in the police's handling of the case. Burrs believed that 1 or more police officers might have engaged in misconduct or interfered with the investigation. The handwriting in the diary found did not match Patty's, suggesting it was written by someone else. He also realized that some defense witnesses had not been called during the first trial. One of these was forensic pathologist James Terzian, who concluded that the cause of death was drowning. During the second trial, Dr. James Terzian testified for the defense, raising some questions about the case details. In response, the prosecution brought in another pathologist, Michael M. Baden, to support the original findings of the first pathologist. Baden claimed James to have performed thousands of autopsies, including numerous drownings. But James had only handled 2 drowning cases in his career. The lawyers also presented photographs taken near the lake, demonstrating that burdock plants do grow in that area. Despite the jury's divided opinions during deliberations, they ultimately found Peter guilty once more. He received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In September 2011, Peter filed an appeal, claiming that his lawyer was ineffective and pointing out mistakes made by the prosecution. He also requested to change the trial's location to ensure that the new jury would not be aware of his previous convictions, allowing them to be more impartial. However, it was revealed that the last jury was aware of his prior guilty verdicts, which may have influenced their decisions. In December 2011, the appellate court approved Peter's appeal, but the trial venue remained unchanged. In June 2012, the third trial commenced. A private detective had spent 15 years investigating Peter's case and strongly believed in his innocence. Alongside Peter's lawyer, they gathered numerous arguments to support him in court. During this trial, there was a significant clash between the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution argued that if Peter had lied about his wife swerving on the road to avoid a deer, then he must be lying about everything else. In contrast, the defense contended that Peter was trying to protect his wife, as a sixth drunk driving charge could cost her nursing license. The pathologist's third report originally indicated drowning as the cause of death, but was later revised to strangulation after considering the presence of burdock. He noted evidence of lung singeing and observed that there was insufficient water to support drowning. James A., on the other hand, maintains that Patty died of drowning. However, after analyzing the lungs and their weight, James concluded that the water content was inadequate to confirm drowning. The ambulance report stated that during the assistance to Patty, a lot of water was pumped out of her, and in the intensive care unit, it took 45 minutes. The prosecution argued that since there were no burdocks in the lake, it is likely that Patty was killed near her house, where burdocks were present, and then her body was disposed of in the water. In contrast, the defense pointed out that there were no signs of a struggle in the courtyard of Wlasiuk House. Simultaneously, no defensive wounds on Patty, and no dirt or DNA from her husband found under her nails. Furthermore, her white shoes and clothing remained clean, suggesting that water alone could not have washed away any potential dirt. An expert for the prosecution stated that the pickup truck entered the lake slowly, suggesting it was pushed rather than driven off the road quickly, as there were no skid marks present. In response, a defense expert challenged this claim, alleging that the prosecution's experts had made errors and presented photos that showed skid marks on the road. The prosecution maintained that Patty had almost no alcohol in her system, while the defense presented toxicology reports indicating she was intoxicated and had a history of multiple drunk driving offenses. Reply: the prosecution argued that witnesses who came forward claimed Peter's hair was dry while his body was wet, which contradicts earlier statements that he was wet all over. They also pointed out that hair belonging to Patty was found on the burdocks in the yard, indicating that the crime took place there. In response, the defense contended that it is normal for a homeowner's hair to be found in the yard and suggested that the wind could have carried it there, highlighting that there were no signs of a struggle. The prosecution argued that Peter had placed the pickup truck near the recall, while the defense contended that leaving her in such an obvious location was illogical. They claimed that if Peter had intended to harm Patty, he would have been more likely to put her in the cabin and use a seatbelt to pull her to the bottom of the lake. Patty was discovered in the water outside the car, indicating that her husband attempted to rescue her by pulling her out but could not get her to the surface. End of trial. Peter was sentenced to life in prison, but he could be eligible for early release after 25 years. The judge described him as a dangerous individual who poses a threat to society. In 2016, Peter's appeal was rejected, and he continued to serve his sentence. His oldest daughter visited him during this time. The case attracted significant public interest, leading to a group of supporters who believed he was innocent. Heather, a girl, discovered information about Peter while studying criminal law through social media. In 2015, she volunteered to assist him by sending a postcard. Although she worked hard to help him seek justice, all of his subsequent appeals were denied. A year later, Peter and Heather got married in prison. She expressed that their relationship was challenging and not for the faint of heart, but she had faith in him and planned to be with him no matter where he was. The couple believed that there was a conspiracy by law enforcement against Peter, claiming that some water was deliberately removed from the lungs before the autopsy. They think Patty had influential relatives who may have affected the outcome of the case. Her cousin worked in the district attorney's office, and her mother was a senior hospital prosecutor. At that time, the prosecutor needed to secure a conviction to boost their chances in an upcoming election for a judgeship, and this case helped them achieve that goal. Peter and Heather felt that Peter was simply unlucky and a victim of the situation. To support Peter, Heather created a fundraising page and a social media account to raise awareness about the case. Despite her efforts, Peter is still incarcerated at the Coxsackie Correctional Facility. In March 2027, he will be eligible for parole. The tragic case of Patty Wlasiuk is a chilling reminder of the potential darkness that can exist behind closed doors, even in seemingly ordinary lives. The unexpected twists and turns of the investigation, from inconsistencies in Peter's story to the suspicious circumstances surrounding her death, paint a picture of a man willing to go to any lengths to cover up his crimes. Ultimately, Peter's conviction for second-degree murder after a lengthy legal battle brought some justice to Patty's family, although the emotional scars remain. The case not only underscores the importance of a thorough investigation, but also highlights the difficulty of uncovering the truth when the perpetrator is someone close to the victim. Thanks to the persistence of the authorities and the resilience of Patty's family, justice was finally served, bringing closure to a story that might otherwise have faded into darkness. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Heather Rich. We all experience youthful adventures, a rebellious spirit, and the transition into adulthood. However, for some, adolescence can become perilous. In the remote southern region of Oklahoma, USA, lies a quiet town named Waurika. This small community has around 2,000 residents, where everyone knows one another, and life is calm and steady. In the fall of 1996, the Rich family lived in Oklahoma. Mom Gail, Dad Dwayne Rich, and their 4 children, 3 boys, and a girl named Heather. At the time, Heather was a sophomore in high school. She was an excellent student and cheerleader, known for her beauty and ability to attract attention. Heather was kind, but had a rebellious streak in her teenage years. On the evening of October 2, 1996, an argument broke out between Gail and Heather. They discussed a phone bill that cost the family $300, which upset Gail's mother, who disapproved of Heather's spending habits. Dwayne, the father, on the other hand, remained calm about the situation. Gail explained to Heather that due to the family's difficult financial situation, she could not afford to pay the large monthly bills. Dwayne, an electrician, had suffered severe burns from a transformer explosion and required extensive medical care and skin grafts. He was unable to work and support the family, forcing Gail to take on additional work to make ends meet. Every dollar was important, especially since Dwayne was about to undergo expensive surgery. Gail wanted Heather to learn the value of money and the importance of being self-sufficient, but Heather struggled with this, leading to a serious argument between them. After things calmed down, Heather went to bed. She stopped by the living room to say goodnight to her father, but walked past her mother in silence to express her resentment. The next morning, October 3, Gail woke everyone up for breakfast, as was their usual routine. However, Heather did not come down for breakfast. Gail believed that it was because Heather was angry due to the events of the previous night. Gail hoped that when Heather was hungry, she would come down to eat. But after a while, Heather still did not appear. Gail went up to check on her in her room. Gail was surprised to find the room empty. At that time, cell phones were not common, and Heather did not have a phone. Worried, her parents called one of Heather's friends, but no one knew where she was. This behavior was unusual for Heather. She had never run away before and didn't have any mental health issues. She always took care of her appearance and wouldn't leave the house for long without changing clothes or doing her makeup. With all her belongings still at home, worried Gail and Dwayne immediately went to the sheriff's department in Wow to report their daughter missing. Gail explains their argument from the previous day, when Gail expressed her frustration over the large phone bill, which was a significant burden on the family, and Heather appeared stubborn and determined not to admit her mistake. The sheriff tried to reassure the parents by comparing the situation to a typical teenage runaway, especially after an argument with her mother. However, this behavior was unusual for Heather, who usually tried to find a compromise even after a disagreement. The sheriff explained that most runaways returned home after a period of time. They suggested to the parents that Heather might have returned while they were at the sheriff's office. The police told Gail and Dwayne that Heather would need to be missing for at least a day before they could officially declare her missing. Since that time had not passed, the police could not accept their report. Frustrated and worried, Gail and Dwayne believed that something was wrong and that their daughter was in danger. They began searching all over town, starting with Heather's closest friends. One of these friends was Randy Wood, a 17-year-old boy who was the captain of the school's football team. He had dated Heather, but they had quickly broken up and agreed to remain friends. Importantly, he was one of the boys responsible for Heather's large phone bill. When asked about Heather's whereabouts, Randy said that he did not know where Heather was or what had happened to her. Gail then decided to contact another friend of Heather's, a 17-year-old high school student named Joshua Luke Bagwell, whom Heather had just started dating. When Gail called, Joshua's grandmother answered and said that he was resting after a party. She wanted to let him sleep and refused to wake him up to take the call. Joshua's grandmother said she was cleaning out the trailer in their yard where the school children had played the night before. When the mother asked about her daughter's disappearance, she said she didn't know. Relatives then searched the area for any sign of Heather. After a day of unsuccessful searching, her parents returned to the police station, and eventually the police joined the search effort. By October 10, a week after the search began, no useful information about Heather had been found. Given the amount of time that had passed, few people still held out hope of finding her alive. When searchers reached the area near the Texas border, a body was found floating face down, partially submerged in muddy water. Observers from a bridge noticed that the body was covered in mud, making it difficult to see in the murky water, as if someone had deliberately obscured it. When a diver finally recovered the body and brought it to shore, it was observed that the body had been severely mutilated with multiple gunshot wounds. A forensic examination was conducted. Experts later determined that the victim had been shot 9 times at close range. The condition of the body was horrific, with many serious cuts. During this time, there was only one missing person in the area, so Heather's parents were asked to identify the body. They only recognized their daughter through the ring on her finger, an engraved piece of jewelry that her mother had given her. Later, dental records confirmed that it was indeed Heather's body. The news of her death quickly became the talk of the town the next day. Within hours, the entire village knew about the case. Randy Wood also heard the shocking news that same day. It just so happened that Randy had been crowned king of several football seasons that day. It was expected that there would be a big celebration after the game. However, Randy was deeply affected by what had happened to his ex-girlfriend Heather. He then went to the bridge and stared at the spot where Heather's body was found for a long time. In fact, he knew more about the situation than he had shared with Heather's parents. The investigation quickly led the police to Randy and some of his friends. One of them is the son of wealthy parents. The second is the best football player in school and captain of the team. The third is an ambitious criminal from the streets. As soon as the police got involved in the case, they spoke to Heather's parents. By that time, Gail had contacted several of Heather's friends and acquaintances. Gail became suspicious of 2 young men: Heather's ex-boyfriend, 17-year-old Randy Wood, and her current boyfriend, Joshua Luke Bagwell, who slept after a party and did not answer Gail's phone calls. She believed they were hiding something. These high school students appeared to be reciting rehearsed answers, and when pressed with further questions, they struggled to answer. Their behavior was quite tense. Gail believes that Randy and Joshua have more information than they are admitting. While talking to Heather's classmates and friends, the police have gathered many clues that Joshua and Randy know important details, and they should assist the police in uncovering what happened on that tragic night when Heather left home after an argument with her mother. Heather's best friend told her that Heather was planning to attend a party that night to meet her boyfriend, Joshua. Even though her parents had forbidden her from leaving the house after dark, she decided to sneak out. After her parents fell asleep, she climbed out of the window around 11 p.m. At the party, she was supposed to meet Joshua and Randy. Joshua came from a wealthy family and always arrived in fancy cars and dressed better than his peers. Randy comes from a humble family, but his athletic talents make him as popular as his wealthy friend Joshua. Randy is an attractive young man who is admired for his ability to play football at a professional level. Randy has earned the position of captain of the team through his skills and is recognized as the best player in town. Randy and Joshua are close friends. They often spend weekends driving Joshua's car along country roads. They often hang out with girls and drink frequently and smoke occasionally. There were few places for teenagers to hang out in the city, so they found their own ways to have fun. Heather, along with a friend, experimented with drinking and hanging out with popular boys. The night before she disappeared, she left home to spend time with them. On September 27, 1996, just 5 days before Heather went missing, Heather and another cheerleader were found in the hallway of the stadium with marijuana and smoking paraphernalia. It was also revealed that Heather had been drinking alcohol. As a result, she was suspended from school for 3 days, and her parents learned about this from her teacher. They were upset, as they never expected their 16-year-old daughter to engage in such dangerous behavior. Heather explained that curiosity led her to try these substances. She promised her parents that she would stop. Her parents became increasingly concerned about why she had chosen this path, as she was an excellent student and athlete. Although her parents believed her promise to quit, they found it difficult to confirm whether she was telling the truth. Bad habits may have played a direct role in her death. Police focused on Joshua and Randy to uncover the events at the party before Heather disappeared. Randy said he and Joshua had been in a trailer behind Joshua's house, where they spent the evening playing and drinking. However, both insisted they had not seen Heather that night, which raised the police's suspicions. The two young men told their stories in identical, almost rehearsed ways, they showing little emotion. This behavior led police to suspect that the teens were not telling the truth. At this stage, the police lacked evidence linking Joshua and Randy to the crime. However, their unusual behavior raised suspicions of their involvement. As a result, both young men became prime suspects, prompting a closer look at their backgrounds, their connection to Heather, and the events of that night's party. The autopsy revealed new insights, particularly regarding the number of shots fired at Heather. Remarkably, even police handguns typically only held 8 rounds. This begs the question, why reload the gun to fire another shot when the person was clearly dead? The second notable detail was the type of ammunition used to kill Heather. The killer chose Winchester double-shot. These bullets were quite rare and could only be purchased from one store in the city. Police checked the store's receipts and discovered that just before the murder, only one person had purchased this type of ammunition. The seller identified the buyer as Joshua in photos provided by the police. He came into the store and bought a whole box of 20 bullets. The seller also mentioned that Joshua was with another person. This person was not Randy, but Joshua's close friend, Curtis Allen Gamble, who was known to the police. He had a history of legal trouble, including multiple arrests. Despite his young age, Curtis had spent much of his life in juvenile facilities. He had a troubled past, having been arrested for drunk driving and shooting at animals, and even passers-by. Curtis quickly became the prime suspect, as Joshua and Randy had no previous legal problems and were never considered aggressive or dangerous. On October 23, police went to Curtis's home in another city. Notably, just a short distance from his home was a bridge over the river where Heather's body was discovered. After police arrived and found Curtis was not home, they spoke with his grandmother. She shared information about her grandson and noted that Curtis was very familiar with the area of the neighboring city and frequently visited the bridge where Heather was found. She mentioned that she used to take him fishing at that location when he was a child. The next day, Curtis was arrested and taken to the Orica Sheriff's Office. The interrogation lasted over 8 hours, during which Curtis remained mostly silent but agreed to take a lie detector test. However, the most important information the police learned was that Curtis admitted to owning a Mossberg handgun. This type of handgun can use a special type of bullet. Police suspected that he may have owned the weapon used in the murder. Investigations revealed that Heather had been shot with this rare type of handgun. After they seized the weapon and conducted gun tests, experts confirmed that it was indeed the weapon used to kill Heather. When the police presented evidence linking Curtis to Heather's murder, the investigation took a significant break. Curtis broke down and told the police that his two friends, Randy and Joshua, were involved in the murder. Curtis then wrote a one-page confession. The police were able to identify the killers. Randy and Joshua were then arrested and taken to the sheriff's department. There, the police presented Curtis's confession, in which Curtis was the one who wanted to kill Heather and that he initiated the attack. However, he was not the one who actually carried out the murder. According to Curtis, he gave Joshua his weapon and forced Joshua to shoot Heather. However, the police were skeptical of Curtis's confession, as Joshua did not fit the profile of a criminal. Joshua had no previous problems with the law, was known to be a model student, an excellent athlete, and was generally well-liked. The party took place in southern Oklahoma, while the murder took place in Texas. As a result, they had to appear in court in Texas, where the crime could result in the death penalty. After being pressured by the police, Randy finally spoke during a second interview. However, he denied any involvement in the murder, saying that Curtis committed the crime and that Joshua assisted him. Joshua, meanwhile, chose not to cooperate with the investigation. In October 1996, the police received two conflicting confessions. They decided to believe Randy's story, especially since he had passed a lie detector test. According to Randy, he had planned to go out drinking with his friends Curtis and Joshua that night. Randy later learned that Heather was supposed to be joining them. Heather knew Joshua and Randy, but had never met Curtis, so she had no idea he could be dangerous. That night, everyone drank a lot of alcohol, and Heather gradually lost consciousness. In her drunken state, Curtis harassed her and tried to attack her. Although she could barely speak, Curtis was afraid that when she woke up, she would remember what had happened. Knowing that rape was a serious crime that could result in a prison sentence, Curtis suggested that Heather be eliminated to avoid consequences. Randy thought he was joking, but he was serious. Curtis took a handgun from his car and aimed it at everyone present. Joshua and Randy understood the danger they were in, so they chose not to resist. They put the intoxicated Heather in the trunk of Joshua's car and drove towards Curtis's house. Before they arrived, Curtis led them across a bridge where Heather's body was later discovered. Curtis ordered the car to stop in the middle of the bridge and told them to pull Heather out of the trunk and place her near the railing. Fearing for their own safety, Joshua and Randy complied, but Heather was too intoxicated to stand. They left her on the ground. Curtis approached Heather and began shooting at close range. Randy saw a large hole appear in Heather's skull and instinctively covered his eyes, not wanting to see any more. Curtis unloaded all his bullets on her. Curtis and Joshua then dumped her off the bridge and drove away. Randy said they were horrified by what they had just witnessed and the extent of the cruelty Curtis had inflicted on Heather. They decided to remain silent out of fear for their own lives. In October 1996, Randy Wood, Joshua Luke Bagwell, and Curtis Allen Gamble were charged with the kidnapping and murder of 16-year-old Heather. Of the three, Joshua was the most difficult to deal with because he would not confess, remained silent, and there was virtually no evidence against him. The prosecutor had to rely on the testimony of Randy and Curtis, but their testimony was inconsistent. To resolve this problem, the prosecutor offered Randy a deal. He had to testify against Joshua in exchange for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in 30 years. Randy quickly accepted the offer. On October 15, Curtis agreed to a plea deal that could have resulted in life imprisonment without parole. However, while in prison awaiting trial, Curtis assaulted a security guard, knocking him down and attempting to choke him before other guards intervened. Nearly a year and a half after Heather's death. In February 1998, Joshua's trial began. The defense made numerous attempts to justify the actions of those involved in the crime. The attorneys sought to discredit Heather by portraying her as an alcoholic and a womanizer, claiming that she had an inappropriate relationship with Curtis and that she had begun to threaten others. They argued that this behavior motivated Curtis to choose to eliminate her. Heather's parents defended their daughter, insisting that Heather was a talented athlete and a good person. She accidentally went with a bad group of friends and met a criminal. The floor was unexpectedly given to Curtis, he reiterating his claim that Joshua had nothing to do with the crime and had no knowledge of the planned murder. He claimed that Randy was the one who shot Heather. In a surprising turn of events, Randy refused to take the plea deal. He did not want his confession to be seen as an attempt to save himself and put others at risk. In court, he stated that he wanted to seek justice for Heather, despite his attorney advising him not to. Although this noble choice put him at risk of the death penalty, it left a strong impression on Heather's parents, who later met with Randy in person to discuss the situation. On February 14, Randy took the stand before the jury, sharing his account of the tragic events of that night, and the jury believed him completely. Randy described how Joshua had participated in Heather's murder along with Curtis, and also detailed Curtis's role in covering up the crime. That day, Curtis was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, resulting in a sentence of life in prison plus 99 years. On May 8, Heather's and Randy's parents met during a live broadcast. Despite their deep sorrow over their loss, they were struck by the honesty of Randy and the genuine remorse he showed. On August 7, 1998, Randy Wood's trial ended, and he was found guilty of murdering the Heather, receiving a life sentence with the chance of parole after 40 years. Many people were upset by this verdict, as Randy was the only one who demonstrated remorse and risked his own safety to tell the truth. Many felt that he did not deserve such a severe punishment. Joshua was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was placed in the same correctional facility as Curtis. In January 2002, both men made a bold escape at night and evaded capture for 10 days while hiding in Texas, prompting a national alert. Eventually, they were caught and returned to prison. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Eve Stratford. Eve Stratford was born on December 28, 1953, in Dortmund, West Germany, to parents Albert and Liza Stratford. Her mother was German, while her father was a British doctor who met in the 194 Eros. The family traveled the world, eventually settling in Aldershot, a small town in southeast England. Her younger brother was also born there. During her childhood, Eve won 3 beauty contests and dreamed of becoming a model who would feature on a popular magazine cover. In 1972, at the age of 18, Eve met Tony Priest, a young musician and lead singer of a band called Onyx. They believed that moving to London would boost their chances of success. In 1973, Eve, Tony, and 3 other band members relocated to Leighton in East London. They rented a 4-bedroom flat and lived together. Due to their limited finances, they struggled to make ends meet and slept on old mattresses on the floor instead of beds. Eve Stratford had the ambition to succeed in the modeling industry. Shortly after moving to London, she found a job at the Playboy Club in Park Lane, thanks to a friend's recommendation. She quickly became popular with the club's wealthy clientele, which included millionaires, politicians, celebrities, and even individuals in the criminal underworld. She also became a favorite of the club's owner, Victor Oberlans. All the waitresses at the club wore velvet and bow ties to serve the most prestigious guests in London. At work, Eve introduced herself as Eve Von Bach, or Eve Bunny. She proudly shared photos of herself with comedians Eric Morecambe and Sid James, as well as a photo with boxing champion John Conti. She mailed these photos to her parents and felt proud of herself, but she always dreamed of more. In 1975, at the age of 21, Eve applied to be a Playboy cover model, but was rejected. However, fortune smiled upon her when she received an invitation to pose for the cover of Mayfair, Playboy's British rival. Adopting the pseudonym Eve Von Bach, she appeared topless on the cover, and inside the magazine there were 9 pages of interviews with her, along with a large poster of her completely naked. The March 1975 issue of Mayfair sold 460,000 copies, mostly to men. They called Eve the classic blonde. In a 9-page interview, she shared her preferences in love, admitting that she liked being submissive to a strict man. However, she stressed that she did not like being tied down or punished. She enjoyed seducing men and watching their excitement. She admitted that she often flirted and teased men, which made her feel happy. She also said that she liked both men and women. In the interview, she misled readers by saying that she lived alone with a cat, which sometimes made her feel sad and lonely. The nude photo shoot made Eve's boss, Victor Oberlans, very angry. He suspended her from her job as a waitress for 3 months, but she was not too worried about this. She was aware that she had violated her contract by working for Playboy's competitors. In a discussion with her manager, Aaron Morris, she confessed that her dream was to become a model and that she was doing everything she could to achieve that goal. She said that she did not want to serve rich men forever and was not afraid of losing her job as a waitress at the Playboy Club. She hoped that her appearance on the cover of Mayfair would lead to new job opportunities and help her advance her career. She believed that in the next 3 months, she would not need to return to the Playboy Club. Eve had no idea what was coming next. By then, her boyfriend, Tony's band, had completely disbanded. Although after moving to London, the group has performed as an opening act for famous bands such as Queen and T-Rex. But then, Tony and a friend, a former band member, had to work as forklift drivers. The other 2 members joined another band and left them. After Eve was suspended from her job, she spent the day in their rented apartment. Soon, she received 2 job offers, one for a photo shoot with a South African magazine and another as a model for a crime fiction magazine cover, in which she played a victim with a knife stuck in her throat. On Tuesday, March 18, 1975, Eve met with her manager. Then she visited a company that promoted stars on the BS Waters show. At 15:50, she returned home by subway. On the way, she stopped at a flower shop and bought a bunch of dried flowers wrapped in a plastic bag. She arrived home around 4:10 p.m. About 20 minutes later, the neighbor downstairs heard a man and a woman talking in her apartment, and their conversation seemed calm. About an hour later, at 5:15 p.m., the downstairs neighbor suddenly heard a loud noise. She thought someone might have dropped a chair. Then she heard the sound of someone leaving Eve's apartment and coming down the stairs. Just 10 minutes later, Eve's boyfriend, Tony, returned home with a friend and discovered a horrifying scene. His girlfriend, Eve Stratford, was lying on a mattress in the bedroom. Her throat had been cut so deeply that her head was nearly severed from her body. Her hands were bound behind her with a scarf, and her ankles were tied with stockings. She was wearing a pink bra, panties, and a blue nylon housecoat that was open in the front. Tony immediately called the police. The officers and detectives who arrived described it as one of the most gruesome scenes they had ever encountered. Upon examining the apartment, they found no signs of forced entry, indicating that Eve had likely let her attacker in. There were no signs of a struggle, and everything was in its usual place. The crime scene was filled with a disturbing, overpowering smell. Forensic experts later determined that she had been stabbed between 8 to 12 times in the neck. Additionally, they found semen from a strange man on her body. Police thoroughly searched the area around the house, including gardens, garbage bins, and drains, looking for evidence, but they did not find the murder weapon. The only thing they found was a torn magazine lying on the grass, with a picture of Eve on the cover. Detectives believe that the killer saw her picture in the magazine, found her address, and followed her to commit the terrible acts. Witnesses confirmed that Eve was walking alone from the metro station to her apartment, with the last person to see her being a neighbor. She was wearing a small hat and carrying a bag of dried flowers. The bouquet was found inside the apartment, near the front door. There were drops of blood on the bag, proving that she had encountered the killer shortly after entering the house. Investigators noted that the dried flowers matched those in Eve's magazine photos. They also considered the possibility that the killer was a secret lover of Eva's, whom she had invited to her apartment. However, they considered this unlikely, as she knew that her boyfriend Tony could come home at any time. Based on witness accounts, a composite sketch of the suspect was created. Several people reported seeing an unknown man near her house. Witnesses described him as being between 30 and 40 years old, of average height, with a limp and a flushed face. One witness also said that the man had thick, curly black hair. Detectives interviewed two well-known celebrities who frequently interacted with Eve at the club. Their identities were not released, and there was no evidence to suggest they were involved in the crime. Waitresses from the club where Eve worked were also questioned, with some reporting receiving indecent phone calls the day before the tragedy. On the day of Eve's death, she received 3 mysterious phone calls. Each time she answered, there was silence on the other end, and then the call was disconnected. She had previously told friends that she felt she was being followed by a strange man near her home. She knew nothing about him, but remembered that his gait was tense and awkward. After the tragedy, Mayfair editor David Brenner refused to speak to the police. He only answered their questions by phone and claimed that he had never met Eve in person. Another individual involved in the case was Lebanese businessman Abdullah Kawaj, who dined at the Playboy Club daily. He had feelings for Eve and referred to her as his girlfriend. It is reported that they had a very close relationship and that Abdullah was involved in the criminal world. A waitress said that when she informed Abdullah of Eve's death, he cried at the table. He became one of the suspects, and this made him feel uncomfortable because people around him had discovered his secret relationship with Eve. A few months after Eve's murder, a man reported to the police that he had rented a flat to 2 people. When they moved out and he began cleaning, he found a newspaper clipping about Eve's murder in the closet. The clipping was stained with a woman's lipstick. He also found a photograph of Eve stabbed in several places with needles. Unfortunately, the evidence collected did not help the police solve the case. The murder weapon was never found, and as time passed, the likelihood of finding and punishing the perpetrator diminished. Eve's murder attracted a great deal of media attention. Londoners mourned her death, but there were also those who believed that she deserved it because of her promiscuous lifestyle. Some even showed their disdain by vandalizing her grave multiple times. Eve's parents were harassed with obscene phone calls, leading to a nervous breakdown for her mother, Liza. Meanwhile, on September 3, 1975, another girl, Lynn, was murdered in a different part of London. She was only 16 years old when the incident occurred. She was attacked from behind with a hard object to the head and then sexually assaulted. She was born on November 11, 1958. She was a good, diligent girl who had just graduated from high school and was planning to go to college to become a secretary. She was fluent in English, German, and French. On September 3, Lynn was returning home from a cafe where she had spent time with friends. She said goodbye to them around 11:00 p.m. and decided to take a shortcut through a dark alley. She had previously stated that she would never go into that area at night because she knew there were many homeless people there. However, that night, she decided to take a shortcut through that alley. Around 11:20 p.m., as she walked through the alley, she was struck on the head with a heavy object, likely a metal pipe, which resulted in a fractured skull. The attacker then threw her body over a fence into the grounds of an electrical substation to avoid detection. He assaulted she and left, leaving behind traces of his DNA on her body. The next morning, a local security officer discovered Lynn just a few minutes' walk from her home. When the scene was searched, no murder weapon was found. Despite her severe injuries, she was still alive but unconscious. She was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she died a week later. The police quickly launched an investigation and discovered a witness who was walking his dog around the time Lynn was attacked. He reported seeing a white man in the dark alley. Another witness mentioned seeing a man running through the alley. Although they all described the same individual, police were unable to find a suspect. Initially, police believed she was attacked by a friend of European origin. However, upon further investigation, they discovered that it was likely that her attacker had been stalking and lying in wait for her for several hours before carrying out the attack. Despite extensive investigation, police have not found any significant clues, and the case remains unsolved. On September 9, 1977, nearly 2 years after Lynn's death, another murder took place. 27 years old Elizabeth Paravincina was killed just 1.5 kilometers from where Lynn was attacked. Police immediately suspected that the two cases were related. Like Lynn, Elizabeth was walking home late at night on the same street, but in a slightly different direction. She was almost home when she was suddenly attacked from behind with a blunt object. He then dragged her body into the bushes. However, there were no signs of a struggle on her body. Police suspected that the perpetrator panicked about something, causing him to run away without leaving a trace. Witnesses reported a strange man in the area, and a composite sketch was created. But this did not help solve the case. Over time, several more crimes occurred with no suspects identified. Despite attempts to link the cases, only a few common features were found. By 2004, with the advancement of science and DNA testing, Eve's case was linked to Lynn's. The DNA from sperm found in both victims was identical, indicating they were attacked by the same man 6 months apart. Police now believe that both murders were committed by a serial killer who remains at large because his DNA is not in prison databases. The investigations into the cases of Eve and Lynn have been reopened. Police collected DNA samples from all suspects, including those who are deceased. For example, Abdullah's DNA was taken through his son, but no match was found. In 2015, on the 40th anniversary of Eve's murder, police appeared on television appealing for information and offering a $50,000 reward for information that could lead to the capture of her killer. Crucially, prior to 1995, DNA was not collected from people who had been in prison. This means that the perpetrator may have been arrested and imprisoned for other crimes before. It is possible that he shared information about his crimes with someone. Police have sought information from psychiatrists, inmates, and prison guards regarding the girls' murders. In 2020, former officer Chris Clark claimed that serial killer Peter Sutcliffe was responsible for at least 30 additional cold cases, including Eve's murder. In an exclusive interview shortly after Peter's death, Chris stated that while reviewing information on Peter's cases, he noticed many similarities in methods and motives. Peter was convicted in 1981 for 13 murders and 7 attempted murders. Before his arrest, he was married and worked as a truck driver, frequently traveling across England. It was discovered that he had been in the vicinity of Eve's home for a relative's wedding. The wedding took place on Saturday, March 22, 1975, just 4 days after Eve was murdered. At that time, Peter was 29 years old. Peter was in London during the week Lynn was killed. He was staying in a house in North London, about 6.5 kilometers from the site of Lynn's attack. Peter died in 2020 at the age of 74. Unfortunately, the police were unable to collect a full blood sample before his death. Currently, the national database only has swabs from his mouth and hair. His records indicate he is likely responsible for multiple attacks on women from 1969 to the 1980s. Aside from the 20 proven cases, the remaining cases are just police speculation. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Lydia Guardo. Raymond Guardo married Jacqueline in 1956. In the early years of their marriage, they had 2 children, a son named Bruno and a daughter named Nadia. At first, their family appeared to be typical and happy. However, after Nadia's birth, Raymond was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 5 years in prison. While Raymond was in prison, his wife Jacqueline began an affair with another man and became pregnant. When she was allowed to visit him in prison, she informed him that the child was not his. Despite this, he tolerated his wife's infidelity and expressed his desire to adopt the child. Soon, on November 13, 1960, the girl was born, named Lydia Guardo. Years later, Raymond was released from prison, but his relationship with his wife Jacqueline has worsened. She was left alone to care for their 3 children and seemed to have little affection for them. So she decided to send her children to an orphanage, and soon after, her children were adopted by a family. Fortunately, the children were placed with a loving family that provided them with everything they needed to begin a new chapter in their lives. With this support, Bruno, the oldest child, always held onto the hope that his biological parents would come for him and his younger sisters. He even encouraged his sisters to believe that this would happen one day. While still in prison, Raymond saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a woman named Lucienne Ulpat, who was seeking a pen pal. After his release, he found Lucienne and soon married her. Following the marriage, he became determined to reclaim his children by any means. One night, he took a gun and broke into the home of the family that was taking care of his children. The noise frightened the girls. Nadia didn't remember what her father, Raymond, looked like, and Lydia had never seen him before. They thought he might be a kidnapper and were worried that they might be in danger. Raymond successfully took the children from their foster family and placed them in his car, despite their threats to call the police. After several hours of driving, he brought the children to his home, where he introduced them to Lucienne, telling them that she was their new mother and that they would need to follow her rules. During the first years of living together, everything seemed quite stable, at least judging by family photos from the time. The family moved to a new house in a quiet neighborhood. Raymond received a cash allowance and started his own business, which focused on instant postcard printing and various office tasks. Lucienne occasionally worked in his company, but primarily handled office work. However, as time passed, the family's life began to change dramatically. The children suffered abuse from their father, Raymond, and stepmother, Lucienne. Lydia's first memory from this period was witnessing Raymond beat Bruno for playing with a neighbor's child. When Raymond and Lucienne went to work, they hired young girls to care for the children. Upon returning home, he would pressure these girls to drink alcohol with him. On one occasion, he even attempted to persuade one of the girls to have sex, but she managed to escape. The girl's father then came to the house to confront Raymond and seriously injured him. After that incident, Raymond stopped hiring nannies. Later, he bought a trailer to take his family on vacation to the beach. Once they arrived, they spent time swimming and relaxing like other vacationers. However, an unsettling event occurred. While in the water, Raymond approached his daughter, Nadia, and pressed her against him inappropriately. She struggled to escape his grip, but this only made things worse. From that point on, she became the target of Raymond's abuse. Lydia recalls one day, she heard Nadia's cries coming from the trailer. This marked the beginning of Raymond's sexual abuse of one of his daughters. After that, parents, Raymond and Lucienne, often beat and do other terrible things to their children. Bruno and Nadia stopped going to elementary school, while Lydia, who had never been to school, faced severe mistreatment. This may have been because she was not Raymond's biological daughter. A few years later, around 1971, when Lydia was over 8 years old, the bullying began to get worse. The first incident occurs when Lucienne gets angry because Lydia comes home dirty after playing outside. Her stepmother, Lucienne, put her in a bathtub filled with boiling water and bleach. She recalls that her sensitive skin began to peel and float to the surface of the water. Hearing her screams, Raymond rushed into the bathroom, pulled she out, and laid her on the bed. He attempted to treat her burns with vegetable oil, but soon realized the injuries were severe. Then, she was taken to the hospital, and doctors determined she had third-degree burns. So that Lucienne wouldn't be responsible for the incident, Raymond blamed the city government for providing too hot water. Meanwhile, Lydia was transferred to the intensive care unit and then to the burns unit at the Lion City Hospital, where she remained for several months. She also underwent several skin grafts. Raymond is always by Lydia's side, not because he was a good father, but just to keep her from sharing the incident with others. Eventually, he grew weary of the situation and declared that he would take she home to continue her treatment. Medical professionals were against this decision, but Raymond secured the support of their family doctor, who wrote a confirming that he would continue to treat Lydia. Consequently, Raymond picked Lydia up and carried her out of the burn unit. Back home, Raymond begins to take care of Lydia. He regularly changed her dressings and started to touch her inappropriately. One day, he came home with a camera, claiming he needed to take pictures for the insurance company. He first photographed Lydia, asking her to smile, and then took pictures of her private areas. He then told the girl that the family doctor had prescribed this medicine. He forced her to inhale that drug, leaving her in a semi-conscious state. Although she was aware that he was about to do something strange and painful, she was unable to resist. At that time, he was sexually assaulting she. During this time, Raymond's wife, Lucienne, did not intervene. Instead, she encouraged his behavior. For 9 years, Lydia came to see what was happening as normal. She believed her father, Raymond, loved her, which led her to think there was nothing wrong with his actions. Years later, in an interview with a French television show, Lydia explained how Raymond justified his horrific actions. He told his children that he was doing this for their well-being. He also claimed that, as their father, he had the right to do so. In 1975, the Guardo family moved to the village of Coulombe, about 40 kilometers from Paris. At their new home, Raymond and Lucienne continued to abuse their children. The teenagers still did not attend school and had very little contact with the outside world. After returning to work, Raymond managed to get permission to park his printing van at a shopping center. To attract attention, he displayed photos of Lydia's burned legs on the van. Next to the photos, there were posters announcing that Lydia's injuries were due to the negligence of the authorities, and that they had yet to compensate her. Thus, he created the image of a father, calling for public attention and justice. When he felt that the photos alone weren't enough, Raymond forced Lydia to accompany him so that people could see her scars. He used the sympathy of bystanders to sell his goods and make money. Bruno was the first to try to stop the abuse from Raymond and Lucienne. Before that, Bruno, Nadia, and Lydia tried to escape, but they were caught and punished. Despite this, Bruno, who had suffered years of physical abuse, eventually managed to escape. According to some sources, Bruno contacted the authorities to report his family's problem. However, the authorities did not take his claims seriously. Meanwhile, his younger sisters, Nadia and Lydia, continued to suffer from Raymond's behavior. As they grew older, their bodies began to change. Noticing this, Raymond bandaged his daughters' chests with elastic bandages, making it difficult for them to breathe. The bandages eventually became tattered and dirty, as he did not allow them to be removed for months. He did not want anyone other than himself to touch his daughters. Years later, Bruno returned to rescue his sister Nadia, who was now an adult. He successfully saved her, but Lydia remained in danger. Raymond confined her to the dark, damp attic, where he abused her multiple times a day. She felt betrayed by her siblings for leaving her behind. She tried to escape from home several times, but Raymond spread rumors that she was mentally ill. So every time she tried to contact the authorities, they immediately brought her back home. After another escape attempt, Raymond even chained her up to keep her from fleeing again. When Lydia turned 18, Raymond decided it was time for her to have children. He was so determined to make this happen that after each intimate encounter, he would tie her legs together to supposedly increase the chances of her getting pregnant. At 19, she became pregnant for the first time, and for almost the entire 9 months of her pregnancy, she was kept on a leash. This was to prevent her from having an abortion. She gave birth to her first child on December 8, 1982. Despite becoming a mother, Lydia continued to try to escape, but Raymond caught her repeatedly and punished her harshly. On one occasion, he locked her in the attic for 6 months. During this time, she suffered abuse from Raymond and Lucienne, who often used kitchen utensils as weapons. The only companions she had were rats. She went on to have 5 more children between 1986 and 1996. Her youngest child, a boy named Rudy, is not Raymond's but someone else's, conceived while she was trying to escape. Raymond took great pride in his children, who initially did not even know who their real mother was. Neighbors, grocery store owners, and authorities representatives all came to congratulate him on having a large family and pay their respects. Every time Lydia was ready to give birth, Raymond would take her to a hospital outside the border. There, with threats to kill her, he would force her to say that he was her husband and the father of her children. He was skilled at manipulating and she felt powerless to resist him. It all ended in 1999. Raymond, who was diabetic, began to suffer serious health issues due to his neglect of his well-being. One day, his condition deteriorated, resulting in the amputation of several toes on his left foot. After the surgery, he continued to ignore the doctor's advice, and his health condition worsened. One day, Lydia visited Raymond in the hospital and learned that he had died the night before from a pulmonary embolism. This news brought her to tears, as she seemed to forget all the pain he had caused her. Before the death of the man who had abused her for a long time, she could not understand why she felt so sad. As Lydia left the hospital, she recalled how Raymond once forced her to promise that she would end her life immediately after his death. Years of his control had deeply affected her mindset. She walked to the nearest bridge and, in a moment of despair, jumped into the river. After she fell, she lost consciousness. Then, rescuers had pulled her from the water. In that moment, she realized that the horrors of her past were finally behind her. Thus, the 28-year saga of bullying, sexual assault, and imprisonment ended. She was free at last. After Lydia was released, she faced many challenges. As an illiterate and unemployed young woman, she needed to rebuild her life. She also had to reconnect with her children, who had been raised by Raymond and Lucienne, without any contact with her. Fortunately, after years of neglecting the issue, the authorities began to support her. Initially, she was allowed to stay in the house where she had been held captive, although she was too afraid to go into the attic, the site of her abuse. Lydia's stepmother, Lucienne, who was 68 at the time, went to trial in 2007. She received a 3-year suspended sentence for failing to stop the crimes committed by Raymond. In 2008, this sentence was appealed and increased to 4 years probation. Lydia bravely shared her story with everyone. Despite still being illiterate, she collaborated with journalists and writer Jean-Michel Radem to publish a book about her difficult journey to freedom. In her book, Lydia criticized many government agencies. According to her, during the days when she escaped, they made her fall back into a bad situation without trying to understand the situation. She was especially critical of her stepmother, Lucienne, who not only ignored her suffering, but also actively participated in the physical abuse. She also criticized Bruno, Nadia, and medical workers who treated her injuries from burns, bruises, and cuts. She claims that medical staff ignored the obvious signs of her mistreatment and chose to remain uninvolved. Additionally, she criticizes her neighbors for not contacting any social services despite hearing the daily screams of children. Finally, Lydia expressed her disappointment with the French justice system for going easy on Lucienne. After publishing her book, the public became aware of the horrors she endured. Though some people advised her against sharing her story, she firmly believes that victims of such crimes should share their experiences, as it may help protect others. After gaining her freedom, Lydia met Sylvain Skurla. He seemed to come into her life to help heal her from the pain she had suffered. Shortly after they met, they got married and had 2 children. She expressed that she found hope in her husband and began to embrace life again. She participated in several media interviews and documentaries about her experiences, with Sylvain always by her side. However, the indelible traces of her time in captivity still remained in her heart. The scars on her body were a reminder of her past and the struggles she had gone through. With the help of a lawyer, Lydia appealed to the Judicial Commission for compensation. In her appeal, she detailed the torture and abuse she endured from Raymond and Lucienne, as well as her lack of access to education, which hindered her ability to find work. Additionally, she was not registered in the Social Security system because she could not write, preventing her from completing necessary forms. She also mentioned that burns she suffered as a child resulted in a degree of disability. Therefore, it was essential for Lydia to achieve several goals. First, to have her status as a victim recognized. Second, to receive financial assistance from the state to buy a home, ensuring she would never return to the place where she was tortured. On November 16, 2009, the Victims' Compensation Commission awarded Lydia over $100,000 in compensation. Her children, whom she had with Raymond, also received financial support. It was reported that they all found stable jobs, rebuilt their lives, and started their own families. Now, at 61 years old, Lydia has had a long and challenging journey to achieve a happy life. She needed specialized treatment for her emotional and physical scars for many years. However, with Sylvain's support, she was able to begin again. Despite everything she has gone through, she remains a strong and cheerful woman. Later, Lydia re-established communication with Bruno and Nadia. However, she admits that she still feels anger towards Bruno for not taking her with him.